The morning sun painted Silver Ridge Methodist Church in shades of gold and amber, but inside, Eleanor Whitfield's hands trembled as she adjusted her mother's pearl necklace one final time. It was supposed to be perfect. After everything she'd endured, after all the whispers and warnings, she was finally marrying Marcus Blackwood, the man who'd given her purpose when her world had crumbled to dust. The organ's first notes echoed through the small church, and 200 souls from Silver Ridge turned to watch her walk down that aisle. She could feel their eyes, some warm with approval, others sharp with the judgment that had followed Marcus like a shadow since his first wife's death 2 years prior. "Steady now, Miss Eleanor," whispered old Timothy the groundskeeper who'd volunteered to give her away. "You look like an angel descended from heaven itself." But angels, Eleanor thought, didn't have fathers who'd put pistols to their heads after losing everything in railroad stocks. Angels didn't arrive in Colorado territory with nothing but 3 dresses and a teaching certificate, desperate for any position that would keep them from the streets. Marcus stood at the altar, his weathered face softer than she'd ever seen it. At 35, he cut an imposing figure, 6 feet of lean muscle earned from years working the land, dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples. His eyes, usually guarded as a locked vault, shimmered with something that might have been tears as she approached. Little Lucy, his 7-year-old daughter, stood beside him in her blue dress, clutching a basket of wild flowers. The child, who hadn't spoken a word in 2 years, suddenly smiled, actually smiled at Eleanor. That alone made every hardship worth it. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of tradition, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Marcus Blackwood and Eleanor Whitfield in holy matrimony." The Reverend had barely spoken these words when the church doors burst open with such force they slammed against the walls. Every head turned. There, silhouetted against the blazing Colorado sun, stood a man nobody recognized. Tall, gaunt clothes, dusty from hard travel, eyes wild with something between grief and rage. "Stop!" the stranger shouted, his voice cracking like a whip. "That man is a murderer. Marcus Blackwood killed my wife and son." The church erupted. Women gasped. Men rose from their pews. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to where his gun would have been had he been wearing it to his own wedding. "You don't know me. Blackwood." The stranger continued stepping into the church, his spurs ringing against the floorboards like death knells. "Name's Theodore Hutchinson. 3rd Cavalry, 42nd Regiment. Remember Fort Summerhays. Remember what you did there." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. She'd known Marcus had served in the war. What man hadn't? But he'd never spoken of it. Now, looking at his face, she saw recognition dawn in his eyes, followed by something she'd never seen there before: fear. "Daddy." Lucy's small voice broke through the chaos, the first word she'd spoken in 2 years. The basket of flowers tumbled from her hands, petals scattering across the floor like drops of blood. "Get her out of here," Marcus commanded, his voice deadly quiet. Samuel Rivers, the town's veterinarian, and Eleanor's friend from Boston moved quickly to sweep Lucy into his arms. "You murdered them," Hutchinson snarled, advancing down the aisle. "My Mary, my boy James, only 8 years old. You and your unit burned that settlement to the ground. Said it was harboring Confederate spies." "That's not," Marcus started, but Hutchinson cut him off. "I've spent 3 years tracking you down, Blackwood. 3 years since I returned from the war to find graves where my home should have been. And now here you are, about to marry another woman, start another family, while my Mary rots in the ground." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Eleanor looked at Marcus, waiting for him to deny it, to explain, to say something, anything that would make this nightmare dissolve. But Marcus stood frozen, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jump beneath his skin. "Is it true?" she whispered, though in the silence of the church everyone heard. Marcus finally turned to her, and in his eyes she saw the truth, not of guilt, perhaps, but of a weight he'd been carrying far longer than she'd known him. "It's not what he's saying," Marcus said slowly. "But yes, I was at Fort Summerhays. Yes, people died. It was war, Eleanor. Terrible things happened in the war." "Terrible things?" Hutchinson laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call slaughtering innocents?" "Enough." Sheriff Coleman had finally arrived, 2 deputies flanking him. "Mr. Hutchinson, you'll need to come with me. We don't settle disputes in the Lord's house." "This isn't over, Blackwood," Hutchinson promised as the deputies approached. "I'll see you hang for what you did. I've got witnesses, documents. The truth will out." As they dragged Hutchinson away, his shouts echoing through the church, Eleanor stood frozen at the altar. The congregation buzzed like a disturbed hive. Some people fled. Others pressed closer, hungry for scandal. "Eleanor!" Marcus reached for her, but she stepped back, her wedding dress rustling like autumn leaves. "Not here," she said quietly. "Not now." She turned and walked out of the church, her dignity intact even as her world tilted on its axis. Behind her, she heard Reverend Morrison announcing that the ceremony was postponed, heard the explosion of gossip, heard Marcus calling her name. But Eleanor kept walking out into the blazing Colorado sun, her mind spinning back to 8 months ago when she'd first arrived in Silver Ridge with nothing but hope and desperation in equal measure. How had it come to this? How had a simple position as a governess led to standing at an altar with a man who might be a war criminal? The answers she knew lay in those first days when Marcus Blackwood had been nothing more than a name on an advertisement, and she'd been just another Eastern woman fleeing west to escape the ghosts of her past. She hadn't known then that some ghosts follow you no matter how far you run. She hadn't known that the harsh cowboy everyone warned her about would show her a tenderness that would change everything. But now, standing in the dusty street of Silver Ridge with her wedding dress dragging in the dirt, and her future as uncertain as the Colorado weather, Eleanor Whitfield had to decide was love enough to overcome the shadows of war, was the man she'd grown to love, the same one who'd allegedly murdered innocents at Fort Summerhays. The answers would come, but first, she had to remember how it all began. 8 months before that catastrophic wedding day, Eleanor Whitfield stood on the platform of Silver Ridge Station, her entire world contained in 2 worn leather cases and a heart heavy with grief. The journey from Boston had taken 12 days. 12 days of rattling trains, dusty stagecoaches, and nights spent in boarding houses that reeked of tobacco and broken dreams. But it was still better than remaining in Boston, where every street corner held a memory of her former life, and every acquaintance looked at her with that peculiar mixture of pity and relief that it hadn't been their family brought to ruin. The Colorado air hit her lungs like cold water, thin, sharp, almost painful, after the thick humidity of Boston summers. Mountains rose in the distance like purple bruises against the sky, and the town of Silver Ridge sprawled before her in a collection of wooden buildings that looked as if a strong wind might blow them all to Kansas. "Miss Whitfield!" A woman's voice called out, and Eleanor turned to see a figure approaching, sturdy, middle-aged, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I'm Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house. Mr. Blackwood asked me to meet you, get you settled before you head out to the ranch tomorrow." "Mr. Blackwood didn't come himself." Eleanor tried to keep the disappointment from her voice. She'd traveled 2,000 miles for this position, the only response to the dozens of letters she'd sent seeking employment. Mrs. Patterson's expression tightened. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't come to town unless absolutely necessary. Been that way since—" She paused, seeming to catch herself. "Well, since about 2 years now. Come along, dear. Let's get you inside before the evening wind picks up." The boarding house was clean but sparse, and Eleanor found herself sharing a room with a traveling seamstress who snored like a steam engine. But it was the conversation at dinner that truly introduced her to her new world. "You're the new governess for the Blackwood girl?" asked a thin man with suspicious eyes. "Lord help you, miss. That child hasn't spoken a word since her mother died." Died? An older woman leaned in conspiratorially. "That's a gentle way of putting it, Harold. Sarah Blackwood was found at the bottom of Widow's Canyon with her neck broke. Horse came back without her in the middle of a storm. Marcus claimed she went riding against his wishes, but everyone knows nothing," Mrs. Patterson interrupted sharply. "There was an inquiry. Sheriff Coleman found no evidence of foul play. No evidence except a husband with a temper like a grizzly bear and a wife who'd been seen crying in town not 3 days before," Harold countered. "Eleanor pushed her food around her plate, appetite gone. And the child Lucy." "Sweet thing." Mrs. Patterson's voice softened. 7 years old and hasn't made a sound since that night. They say she was standing at the window waiting for her mama to come home when the horse came back empty. Hasn't spoken since. That's why you're here. Marcus has tried 3 governesses already. None lasted more than a month. That night, Eleanor lay awake listening to her roommate's snores and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. But what choice did she have? The $50 a month Marcus Blackwood offered was generous, and she needed every penny. Her father's debts had consumed everything: the house, her mother's jewelry, even the family piano. The only reason she had the traveling cases and the dresses on her back was because her mother had hidden them before the creditors came. The next morning, a wagon arrived driven by a silent ranch hand who introduced himself only as Joe. The ride to the Blackwood Ranch took 3 hours over rutted roads that seemed determined to shake Eleanor's teeth loose. But when they crested the final hill and the ranch spread out before her, she caught her breath. It was beautiful in a raw, untamed way. The main house stood 2 stories tall, built from logs and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Beyond it, she could see barns, corrals, and pastures stretching toward the mountains. Horses grazed in the distance, and somewhere she could hear the lowing of cattle. "It's magnificent," she said to Joe, who merely grunted in response. They pulled up to the house, and Eleanor had barely stepped down when the front door opened. The man who emerged had to be Marcus Blackwood, and Eleanor's first thought was that he looked nothing like a murderer. He was handsome in the way that mountains are handsome, rough-weathered, imposing. His dark hair needed cutting, and his clothes, while clean, were purely functional. But it was his eyes that caught her gray as a winter sky, and holding a sadness so deep she could have drowned in it. "Miss Whitfield." His voice was deep gruff, as if he didn't use it often. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Blackwood." She extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation he took it. His grip was firm but careful, as if he was afraid of breaking her. "I'll be plain with you," he said, releasing her hand. "I need someone who can reach my daughter. She's—" He paused, struggling for words. "She's locked inside herself. The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong, but she won't speak, barely responds to anything. I need someone who won't give up on her." "I won't give up," Eleanor said firmly. "I've taught all manner of children, Mr. Blackwood. Each one is a puzzle waiting to be solved." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, perhaps. "She's in the parlor. Would you like to meet her?" Lucy Blackwood was possibly the most beautiful child Eleanor had ever seen. She had her father's dark hair, but must have inherited her mother's delicate features: high cheekbones, a rosebud mouth, and enormous brown eyes that seemed to hold all the sorrow in the world. She sat by the window, holding a cloth doll, staring out at the mountains. "Lucy," Marcus said gently, "this is Miss Whitfield. She's come to be your teacher." The child didn't even turn her head. Eleanor approached slowly, as she might a spooked horse. She sat down near Lucy, not too close, and followed the child's gaze out the window. "It's beautiful here," Eleanor said softly. "In Boston, where I come from, you can barely see the sky for all the buildings. But here you can see forever, can't you?" Lucy's fingers tightened slightly on her doll. It wasn't much, but it was something. I brought some books with me. Eleanor continued, keeping her voice gentle. Picture books from faraway places. Would you like to see them later? No response, but Lucy's eyes flickered briefly toward her before returning to the window. That's fine, Eleanor said. We have plenty of time. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching. When Eleanor rose and walked back to him, he said quietly, That's more reaction than the last governess got in 3 weeks. She's listening, Eleanor said. She's in there, Mr. Blackwood. She just needs time and patience. Time I have, Marcus said. The patience. Well, that's why I hired you. Over the following days, Eleanor established a routine. She would arrive at Lucy's room each morning, set up lessons whether the child participated or not, and simply talk. She talked about Boston, about the books she was reading, about the horses she could see from the window. Lucy never responded verbally, but Eleanor began to notice small things. The child would lean slightly forward. When Eleanor told stories, her eyes would track Eleanor's movements. And once, when Eleanor brought in wildflowers from the meadow, she saw Lucy's fingers reach toward them before pulling back. Marcus observed from a distance, rarely speaking to Eleanor directly, except for necessary communications about Lucy's care. But she felt his presence watching from doorways, from windows, when she took Lucy for walks from the barn, when they visited the horses. It was Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, who filled in the gaps of the story. Mr. Marcus wasn't always so closed off, she told Eleanor one afternoon while preparing dinner. When he first brought Sarah here as a bride, he smiled, laughed even. They were happy for a time. What changed? Eleanor asked. Mrs. Chen shrugged. Sarah was a city girl from Denver. The isolation got to her. She started going to town, more staying longer. There were arguments. Then came that terrible night. She took off on horseback during a storm against Mr. Marcus's direct orders. Horse came back covered in mud and blood. They found her body the next morning. And people always think the worst, Mrs. Chen interrupted. But I was here that night. Mr. Marcus was in his study when that horse came back. I saw his face when he realized. I've never seen a man break like that. He rode out into that storm, searching for her, until the sheriff forced him to come back. Whatever his faults, Mr. Marcus loved his wife. Eleanor wanted to ask more, but Lucy appeared in the doorway, her doll clutched to her chest. It was unusual. The child rarely sought anyone out. Hello, sweetheart, Eleanor said gently. Did you want something? Lucy walked forward slowly and placed something on the table, a small pressed flower, perfectly preserved. How beautiful, Eleanor breathed. Is this for me? Lucy nodded, the first deliberate communication she'd made. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Lucy. It's the most wonderful gift anyone's given me in a very long time. That evening, as Eleanor prepared to return to town, Marcus had offered her a room at the ranch, but propriety demanded she maintain residence at the boarding house until other arrangements could be made. Marcus stopped her at the door. She's responding to you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know what you're doing differently, but thank you. Every child needs to be seen, Mr. Blackwood, Eleanor replied. Lucy just needs to know it's safe to be seen again. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You lost someone too, he said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor's throat tightened. My parents. Recently. I'm sorry. So am I. They stood there in the doorway, two people marked by lost understanding passing between them without words. Finally, Marcus stepped back. Joe will drive you to town. Same time tomorrow. Same time tomorrow. As the wagon rolled away from the ranch, Eleanor looked back to see Marcus standing on the porch, a solitary figure against the vast Colorado sky. She thought about what the townspeople had said about their suspicions and fears, but she also thought about Lucy's small gesture with the flower and the pain in Marcus's eyes when he spoke of his daughter. Everyone had secrets in the West. Everyone was running from something or toward something. Eleanor had come here to escape the shame of her father's suicide and her family's ruin. Who was she to judge what shadows lurked in Marcus Blackwood's past? She didn't know then that those shadows would soon take shape, that the past Marcus had tried to bury would rise like a specter to destroy the fragile peace they were building. She didn't know that in trying to save Lucy, she would find herself falling in love with a man the whole town feared. But for now, there was just the endless Colorado sky, the memory of a child's first sign of trust, and the image of a lonely man standing guard over his broken kingdom, waiting for something he probably couldn't even name. The West had a way of stripping people down to their essential selves. Eleanor was about to discover who she really was beneath the proper Boston exterior. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would help Marcus Blackwood remember who he had been before grief and guilt had turned him into the harsh cowboy everyone feared. 3 weeks into her employment at the Blackwood Ranch, Eleanor discovered that the past lived in that house as surely as any of its breathing inhabitants. It was in the closed door at the end of the upstairs hallway, Sarah's room untouched since her death. It was in the photographs turned face down in Marcus's study, in the women's riding gloves still hanging by the door, in the way Marcus's jaw tightened whenever anyone mentioned Denver. But most of all, it lived in the silences, Lucy's impenetrable muteness, Marcus's careful distance, and the words Eleanor herself couldn't speak about why she'd really fled Boston. The revelation came on a rain-soaked Thursday afternoon. Eleanor had been reading to Lucy from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland when thunder cracked across the sky like God's own whip. Lucy went rigid, her face draining of color, and before Eleanor could react, the child had scrambled under the heavy oak desk, curling into a ball with her hands over her ears. "Lucy, sweetheart, it's just thunder," Eleanor said softly, kneeling beside the desk. But the child was somewhere else, lost in a memory that Eleanor could only guess at. Marcus must have heard the commotion because he appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Storm's bringing it back," he said quietly. "The night her mother died, there was thunder like this." He moved past Eleanor and sat on the floor near the desk, not trying to touch Lucy, just sitting there. Then he began to speak, his voice low and steady. "I know you're scared, little one. I know the thunder sounds like the world's ending, but you're safe. You're in your home with people who love you. The storm can't hurt you here." Eleanor watched transfixed as this man everyone called harsh and dangerous spoke with such tenderness it made her chest ache. She saw then what others missed, the gentleness beneath the granite, carefully hidden, but undeniably there. "Your mama," Marcus continued, his voice catching slightly. "She wasn't afraid of storms. She used to say thunder was just the mountains talking to each other. Remember how she'd make up stories about what they were saying?" Lucy's sobbing quieted slightly, though she remained hidden. Marcus looked at Eleanor then, and she saw his walls crack just a little. "She needs to hear it," he said. "The truth. She's been carrying her own version of that night for 2 years. He turned back to the desk. "Lucy, the night Mama died, it wasn't your fault. You couldn't have stopped her. She made a choice, a grown-up choice, and sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But it had nothing to do with you." "She was leaving, wasn't she?" Eleanor asked quietly. The question had been building in her mind for weeks, pieces of overheard conversations and avoided glances forming a picture. Marcus's shoulders sagged. Yes, she was going to Denver, to him. Him, Daniel, my brother. The words came out bitter as alkali water. He was supposed to be dead, died at Antietam, we were told. Sarah mourned him before she ever met me. He'd been her first love, you see. When she agreed to marry me, we both thought we were settling for second best. But I loved her. God help me. I loved her enough for both of us. Or so I thought. The rain hammered against the windows as Marcus continued his confession, speaking to the child under the desk, but really speaking to himself, to Eleanor, to the ghosts that haunted every corner of the ranch. Daniel wasn't dead. He'd been in a Confederate prison, then spent years drifting afraid to come home because of what he'd done in the war. When he finally showed up here 2 years ago, Sarah... She took one look at him, and I knew I'd lost her. They tried to hide it, but love like that first love, true love, whatever you want to call it, you can't hide that. Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks. The night she died, they were running away together. I'd forbidden it, threatened to take Lucy, threatened Daniel with the law. He was a deserter, technically. Sarah didn't care. She saddled her mare in the middle of that storm and rode out. Said she'd rather die than live another day in a loveless marriage. His voice broke then. She got her wish. Lucy crawled out from under the desk, then her face streaked with tears, and for the first time in 2 years, she spoke. Mama said she'd come back for me. The words hung in the air like a revelation. Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms, and Eleanor saw him cry for the first time, silent tears that seemed to surprise him as much as anyone. She would have, he whispered into Lucy's hair. She loved you more than anything, more than Daniel, more than me, more than her own life. She would have come back. Then why did she leave? Lucy's voice was so small, so broken. Because sometimes my darling girl people get so lost in their own pain, they can't see past it. Your mama was hurting in ways I couldn't fix. But her leaving, that was about her pain, not about you. Never about you. Eleanor rose quietly, intending to give them privacy, but Marcus's voice stopped her. Stay, he said. Please, Lucy trusts you. And so do I. She sat back down, and Lucy surprised them both by crawling into Eleanor's lap, seeking comfort from this woman who'd become her safe harbor. My mama died too, Eleanor found herself saying. Not in a storm, but after my father. She paused, then pushed forward. My father took his own life, lost everything in bad investments, our home, our savings, my dowry. The shame killed my mother as surely as if she'd taken poison. Heart failure, the doctor said, but I know better. She died of a broken heart and broken dreams. Marcus looked at her with new understanding. That's why you came west. There was nothing left for me in Boston. Every friend we'd had turned their backs, even the church. Suicide is an unforgivable sin, they said. My father was buried in unconsecrated ground, my mother beside him a week later. I sold what little wasn't claimed by creditors and bought a train ticket with the proceeds. Your advertisement for a governess was the only response I received from dozens of inquiries. I'm glad, Marcus said quietly. I'm glad you came. The storm continued outside, but inside the study, something had shifted. 3 broken people sat together, their wounds exposed, but somehow less painful for being shared. Tell me about before, Eleanor said to Marcus. Before the war, before Sarah. Who were you? Marcus almost smiled. Would you believe I wanted to be a teacher like you? Had a place at Harvard even. But then the war came and every able-bodied man was expected to serve. Daniel and I both enlisted him with the cavalry, me with the infantry. We thought we'd be heroes. His laugh was bitter. No one comes home a hero from war. We all come home broken, just in different ways. The man at the church Hutchinson, what he said about Fort Summerhays. Eleanor had to ask. Marcus's face darkened. It's complicated. We had intelligence that Confederate spies were operating from a settlement near the fort. My unit was ordered to search it. But the intelligence was wrong. It was just families, mostly women and children. By the time we realized, there was an explosion. Ammunition store caught fire, we think, but it spread so fast. We tried to evacuate everyone, but people died. Eleanor finished. 17 souls. Marcus said the number branded on his memory, including Hutchinson's family. He wasn't there. He was with another unit. Came back to ashes and graves. The official report blamed Confederate saboteurs, but Hutchinson never believed it. He thinks we set that fire deliberately. Did you? Marcus met her eyes steadily. No, but I was the ranking officer present. Those deaths are on my conscience regardless. I see their faces sometimes, hear the screams, Sarah used to wake me from the nightmares, but now—" He shrugged. Lucy had fallen asleep in Eleanor's arms, exhausted from her emotional breakthrough. Eleanor stroked the child's hair, thinking about the weight of secrets, the poison of unspoken truths. "My father left a note," she said suddenly. "Before he left a note saying he was sorry for failing us. For years I hated him for being a coward, but lately I wonder if it wasn't cowardice, but a twisted kind of love. He thought we'd be better off without him with the insurance money. He was wrong, of course. We'd have rather had him, failures and all." Sarah left a note too, Marcus admitted, hidden in her jewelry box. "I found it weeks later. Said she loved Lucy more than life, but couldn't breathe in this house anymore. Said I'd made her a prisoner of my grief and guilt. Maybe she was right. Or maybe," Eleanor said carefully, "she was a woman in pain who saw only one way out, like my father, like so many people who get lost in the darkness and forget that dawn always comes." Marcus studied her face. "You don't seem lost." "I have been. But then I came here and found a little girl who needed me, a purpose, a reason to get up each morning. And—" She hesitated, then continued, "I found you. Someone who understands that you can be broken and still be worth something." The rain had softened to a gentle patter. Marcus reached out and covered Eleanor's hand with his own, the first time he'd voluntarily touched her beyond the requirements of basic courtesy. "I'm not an easy man, Eleanor. The war, Sarah's death, the weight of this ranch, and raising Lucy alone, it's made me hard. People in town are right to be wary of me. But they're wrong about who you are," Eleanor said firmly. "I've seen you with Lucy. I've seen how you treat your workers, how you care for your animals. You're a good man carrying terrible burdens. That doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you human." Marcus's thumb traced circles on her hand. "When I placed that advertisement for a governess, I was just looking for someone to help Lucy. I never expected—" "Neither did I," Eleanor admitted. "But here we are." Lucy stirred in Eleanor's arms, mumbling something in her sleep. Marcus stood, gently taking his daughter from Eleanor. "I'll put her to bed," he said. "But, Eleanor, would you stay for dinner? Not as the governess, but as a friend." It was the first crack in the wall between employer and employee, between proper and dangerous. Eleanor knew she should refuse, knew what the town would say if they found out. But looking at Marcus holding his daughter with such tenderness, she couldn't bring herself to care about propriety. "I'll stay," she said. That night, over a simple dinner of beef stew and cornbread, they talked about things beyond tragedy. Marcus told her about his plans for the ranch, about breeding better horses, about the school he wanted to build for the local children. Eleanor shared her love of books, her dream of writing stories, her memory of seeing the ocean for the first time. "I'd like to see the ocean," Marcus said. "Take Lucy to California. Maybe let her play in the sand." "You should," Eleanor encouraged. "She'd love it." "Would you come with us?" The question slipped out before Marcus could stop it. He immediately looked stricken. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "Yes," Eleanor said simply. "I would." They sat in silence then, but it was a comfortable silence, full of possibility. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp, with the smell of sage and rain. The mountains stood eternal against the clearing sky, and somewhere in the distance, a nightingale began to sing. Neither of them knew that their growing connection would soon be tested by the unexpected arrival of Samuel Rivers, Eleanor's childhood friend from Boston, who would bring with him memories Eleanor had tried to leave behind and force Marcus to confront the possibility of losing another woman he was beginning to love. But for now, in the lamplight of the kitchen with Lucy safe upstairs and the storm past, they had this moment of peace. Two wounded souls finding comfort in shared pain and tentative hope. Marcus walked Eleanor to the door when it came time for her to leave. "Thank you," he said, "for Lucy, for listening, for understanding." "We all have ghosts, Marcus," Eleanor replied. The trick is not letting them control us." As Joe drove her back to town through the rain-washed evening, Eleanor thought about the stories they'd shared, the wounds they'd revealed. She thought about Lucy, finally speaking about Marcus's tears, about the way his hand had felt covering hers. She was falling in love with him, despite the warnings, despite the propriety, despite her own promises to never be vulnerable again. She was falling in love with the harsh cowboy everyone feared because she'd seen beyond the harshness to the heart beneath. The question was, could love be enough to overcome the past that haunted them both? Could they build something new from the ashes of their former lives? And what would happen when the outside world inevitably intruded on the fragile peace they were creating? The answers would come soon enough with the arrival of a man from Boston and secrets that even Marcus didn't know he was carrying. The day that changed everything started like any other September morning at the Blackwood Ranch. Eleanor had arrived early to find Lucy already dressed and waiting for her on the porch, clutching a small bouquet of wild asters she'd picked herself. In the 6 weeks since the storm that broke Lucy's silence, the child had transformed, still quiet, still cautious, but present in a way that made Marcus's eyes shine with grateful wonder. "For you, Miss Eleanor," Lucy said, offering the flowers with a shy smile. "They're the same color as your eyes." Eleanor accepted the bouquet, touched beyond words. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. Should we put them in water before we start our lessons?" They were arranging the flowers in a mason jar when Eleanor heard the sound of approaching horses, not one but several. Through the kitchen window, she saw Marcus emerge from the barn, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle propped against the fence post. Visitors were rare at the Blackwood Ranch, and unexpected ones were viewed with suspicion. 3 riders appeared over the ridge, 2 men Eleanor didn't recognize, and 1 that made her heart stop. Samuel Rivers sat tall in his saddle, looking every inch the successful Boston gentleman despite the trail dust on his clothes. His sandy hair caught the morning sun, and even from a distance, Eleanor could see that familiar crooked smile that had once made her pulse race when she was 16 and believed in fairy tales. "Eleanor," Lucy tugged at her skirt. "You've gone all pale." Marcus had approached the riders, his posture tense but not hostile. Eleanor watched Samuel dismount, saw him gesture toward the house, saw Marcus's expression shift from wary to something harder to read. Then Marcus was turning, calling for her. "Miss Whitfield, could you come here, please?" Eleanor's legs felt like water as she walked onto the porch, Lucy's hand clutched in hers. Samuel's face lit up when he saw her, and he bounded forward with the enthusiasm she remembered so well. "Eleanor, thank God I found you." He stopped just short of embracing her, seeming to remember propriety. "When I heard about your parents, I went to the house, but the neighbor said you'd gone west. I've been searching for months." "Samuel." Eleanor managed her voice steadier than her nerves. "What are you doing here?" "I came for you, of course." He said it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "When I heard about the tragedy, about your circumstances, Eleanor, you should have written to me. You know I would have helped." Eleanor felt Marcus's gaze on her heavy with questions. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Samuel Rivers, an old friend from Boston. Samuel, this is my employer, Mr. Marcus Blackwood, and his daughter Lucy." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in Marcus, the rough clothes, the calloused hands, the protective way he stood between Samuel and the women. "Your employer," he repeated. "Eleanor, surely you haven't been reduced to domestic service." The condescension in his tone made Eleanor's spine stiffen. "I'm a governess and teacher, Samuel. It's honest work that I'm proud of." Of course," Samuel said quickly. "I didn't mean... Forgive me. The journey has been long, and I'm not expressing myself well." He turned to Marcus with forced politeness. "Mr. Blackwood, I wonder if I might have a word with Miss Whitfield privately. We have much to discuss, family matters from Boston." Marcus's jaw tightened, Miss Whitfield is in the middle of Lucy's lessons. Perhaps you could call again this evening." "It's all right," Eleanor interrupted, though it wasn't all right at all. Her carefully constructed new life and her past were colliding, and she could feel the impact reverberating through her bones. "Lucy, why don't you practice your letters while I speak with Mr. Rivers? I won't be long." Lucy looked between the adults with those two perceptive eyes of hers. "I don't like him," she announced with a child's devastating honesty. "He looks at you like you're something he owns." "Lucy," Marcus admonished, but Eleanor saw his lips twitch with suppressed approval. Samuel laughed uncomfortably. "Children, they do say the most unusual things." Eleanor led Samuel to the far end of the porch, aware of Marcus watching from where he'd positioned himself by the door, not quite eavesdropping, but clearly standing guard. "Why are you really here, Samuel?" she asked without preamble. Samuel took her hands before she could pull away. "I told you I came for you, Eleanor, when I returned from studying in London and heard what had happened. I was devastated. If I'd been there, if I'd known about your father's financial troubles, I could have helped. I could have prevented all of this." "You couldn't have prevented my father's choices," Eleanor said quietly, extracting her hands from his grip. "Perhaps not, but I can fix things now." Samuel reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I've established myself as a veterinarian, a very successful one. I have a practice here in Silver Ridge now, and partnerships forming in Denver and Colorado Springs. I can give you the life you deserve, the life you should have had." Eleanor stared at the envelope. "Samuel, what are you saying?" "I'm saying marry me." He dropped to one knee right there on the porch, pulling out a ring that caught the morning sun like captured fire. "I know I should have asked years ago before I left for London. I was young and foolish, thought I had all the time in the world. But when I heard you disappeared into the frontier, possibly in danger, certainly in distress, Eleanor, I realized I couldn't lose you again." Eleanor heard a sharp intake of breath and turned to see Marcus in the doorway, his face carved from stone. Lucy peered around her father's legs, eyes wide. "Samuel, please get up," Eleanor said urgently. "This isn't, you don't understand." "I understand that you're living in reduced circumstances, working for a man with a questionable reputation in a house where tragedy has occurred. The whole town talks about it, Eleanor, about him, about his wife's mysterious death. This is no place for you." Marcus stepped forward then, and there was something dangerous in his controlled movements. "Mr. Rivers, I think it's time you left my property." Samuel rose, squaring his shoulders. "I'm not leaving without Eleanor. She doesn't belong here, serving a man like you." "A man like me." Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "Everyone in town knows about you, Blackwood, about your temper, about your wife, about the rumors from the war. Eleanor is a gentle soul from a good family. She shouldn't be exposed to—" The crack of Marcus's fist against Samuel's jaw was loud as a gunshot. Samuel stumbled backward, his hand flying to his face, blood trickling from his lip. "Papa, no!" Lucy cried, but Eleanor was already moving, stepping between the two men. "Stop this, both of you." She turned to Samuel. "You have no right to come here and make assumptions about my life or my choices." "Your choices!" Samuel spat blood onto the porch boards. "Look at yourself, Eleanor, living in the middle of nowhere, caring for another woman's child, working for a man who just proved he's exactly the brute everyone says he is." "He's not a brute," Lucy said fiercely, wrapping her arms around her father's leg. "You're the one who came here being mean and saying horrible things. Papa was just protecting Miss Eleanor from your nasty words." Samuel looked at the child with barely concealed irritation. "This doesn't concern you, little girl. Everything that happens in this house concerns my daughter." Marcus said, his voice like gravel. "And everything that concerns Miss Whitfield concerns us. She's not just an employee, Rivers. She's—" He stopped seeming to catch himself, but Eleanor heard what he didn't say. She saw it in his eyes, felt it in the way he'd moved to defend her honor. "She's what?" Samuel demanded. "What exactly is Eleanor to you, Blackwood?" The question hung in the air like morning mist, delicate and charged with possibility. Eleanor looked at Marcus, saw him struggling with words, with propriety, with feelings that had been growing between them for weeks. "I'm home," Eleanor said quietly, the words surprising her as much as anyone. "This is my home now, Samuel. These people are my family." Samuel's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, hurt, anger. "He's compromised you, hasn't he? That's why you won't leave. You're ruined." The slap Eleanor delivered to Samuel's cheek was perhaps even more shocking than Marcus's punch. "How dare you?" she said, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you come here after abandoning me for 3 years to study abroad, after choosing your career over our understanding, and presume to judge my virtue or my choices?" "We had an understanding," Samuel protested, his cheek reddening. "Before I left, we had nothing official. You made sure that. Remember, you wanted to be free to pursue your studies without encumbrance. Well, I've been free too, Samuel, free to find my own path, my own purpose, my own," she glanced at Marcus, "my own future." Samuel straightened his jacket, trying to recover his dignity. "You're making a mistake, Eleanor. This man is dangerous. His past." "We all have pasts," Eleanor interrupted. "You have one too, don't you, Samuel? Should I tell Mr. Blackwood about the scandal with the dean's daughter at Harvard, the one your father paid handsomely to make disappear?" Samuel's face went white. "How did you—" "Boston society loves its gossip. Even ruined daughters of suicides hear things." Eleanor's voice was steady, now strong. "Go back to town, Samuel. Build your practice. Find a wife who wants the life you're offering. But that woman is not me." Samuel looked between Eleanor and Marcus, his expression shifting from anger to something like pity. "He'll destroy you, Eleanor. Men like him always do. And when he does, don't expect me to pick up the pieces." He strode to his horse, mounting with stiff dignity. But before riding away, he turned back. "I'll be staying in town for a while. When you come to your senses, and you will, you know where to find me." As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Eleanor felt her knees begin to shake. Marcus's hand steadied her elbow, gentle despite the violence of moments before. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have hit him." "Yes, you should have," Lucy declared. "He was being horrible to Miss Eleanor." "Violence is never the answer, Lucy," Eleanor said automatically, though her heart wasn't in the scolding. "Sometimes it is," Marcus said quietly. "Sometimes words are violence too, and they need to be stopped." Eleanor looked at him, then really looked at him. His knuckles were already swelling, and there was a wildness in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not anger, but something rawer, more vulnerable. "You called me home," he said wonderingly. "You said this was your home." "It is," Eleanor said simply. "I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between that first day and now this place became home. You and Lucy became—" "Family," Lucy supplied helpfully. "We became family. Does this mean you'll stay forever, Miss Eleanor? Even though that unpleasant man wants to take you away?" Eleanor knelt down to Lucy's level. "Samuel can't take me anywhere I don't want to go, sweetheart. And I don't want to go anywhere." "Good," Lucy said firmly. Then, with the lightning-quick mood change of children, "Can we finish our lessons now? You are going to teach me about the countries across the ocean." As Lucy ran back into the house, Eleanor and Marcus stood alone on the porch. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting shadows that seemed to pull them closer together. "You didn't have to defend me," Eleanor said softly. "Yes, I did." Marcus's voice was rough. "I couldn't stand hearing him talk about you like you were some object to be collected, some problem to be solved. You're so much more than that." "What am I, Marcus?" The question that Samuel had asked, but this time asked with her own voice, seeking her own answer. Marcus reached out his damaged hand, gently touching her cheek. "You're the woman who brought my daughter back to life. You're the light that came into this dark house and made it warm again. You're—" He paused, seeming to gather courage. "You're the reason I've started believing in second chances." Eleanor covered his hand with her own feeling, the swollen knuckles, the calluses, the strength. I need you to know something. What Samuel implied, nothing improper has happened between us. I know, Marcus said. But Eleanor, I'd be lying if I said I didn't wish. If I said I hadn't thought about... I know, Eleanor echoed. I've thought about it too. They stood there, hands touching hearts, racing on the precipice of something that would change everything. Inside the house, Lucy called for them, her voice bright with impatience. Marcus pulled back reluctantly. We should go in, but Eleanor, we need to talk, properly, about us, about the future, about what this means. Tonight, Eleanor promised, after Lucy's asleep. As they walked back into the house, Eleanor felt the weight of Samuel's presence in town like a stone in her shoe. He wouldn't give up easily, she knew him too well for that. And his presence would stir up all the gossip about Marcus, about his past, about the propriety of Eleanor living at the ranch. But looking at Lucy, already bent over her geography book with fierce concentration, and at Marcus trying to ice his knuckles while pretending they didn't hurt, Eleanor knew she'd made her choice. This was her family now, irregular and gossip-worthy as it might be. That evening, after Lucy was safely in bed, Eleanor and Marcus sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The conversation they'd promised to have hung between them, but for a moment they just sat in comfortable silence. He was right about one thing, Marcus finally said. You could have a better life with him. Respectability, comfort, safety. Eleanor turned to look at him. I had respectability in Boston. It didn't stop people from turning their backs when scandal touched us. I had comfort too, until it was all ripped away. And safety is an illusion, Marcus. The only real safety is in choosing who stands beside you when the storms come. And you choose us, Lucy and me, even knowing what people will say. Especially knowing what people will say. Eleanor moved closer to him on the bench. I've been the subject of gossip before. At least this time it's for something I actually chose, something that makes me happy. Marcus took her hand, threading their fingers together. I'm not good with words like Rivers is. I can't make pretty speeches or grand gestures. But Eleanor, these past weeks with you, I hadn't realized how dead I'd been inside until you made me feel alive again. You saved me too, Eleanor said. When I came here, I was just existing, just surviving. You and Lucy gave me purpose again, gave me a reason to hope. So what do we do now? Marcus asked. Rivers won't give up. And his presence will stir up all the old stories, maybe bring more trouble. Eleanor squeezed his hand. Then we face it together. Whatever comes, Samuel, the gossips, the past, we face it together. Marcus brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. Together, he agreed. Neither of them knew that Samuel's arrival was just the beginning, that his investigations would unearth the mystery of Daniel's survival, or that the truth about Fort Summerhays would soon come calling in the form of Theodore Hutchinson. But for this moment, under the vast Colorado stars, they had each other, and that was enough. The harsh cowboy and the Eastern lady, the broken soldier and the ruined debutante, they'd found each other across miles and tragedy, and neither was willing to let go now. The week following Samuel Rivers' dramatic arrival passed in a strange tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. Eleanor continued her daily routine at the ranch, but everywhere she went in town, the general store, the post office, the church, she felt eyes following her, heard whispers dying as she approached. Samuel had been busy, it seemed, sharing his concerns about the tragic Boston beauty trapped in the clutches of a dangerous man. It was Mrs. Patterson who finally told her the full extent of the damage. He's staying at my boarding house, the older woman said, pulling Eleanor aside after church on Sunday. That Mr. Rivers holds court every evening in the parlor, telling anyone who'll listen about your illustrious family back east, about how he's come to rescue you from your unfortunate circumstances. Mrs. Patterson, I don't believe a word of it, mind you, Mrs. Patterson interrupted. I've seen how you look when you come from the ranch, seen the light in your eyes. That's not the look of a woman who needs rescuing. But others, well, people do love a scandal, especially one involving Marcus Blackwood. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. What are they saying? Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then forged ahead. That he's holding something over you. That maybe you witnessed something about his wife's death, and he's keeping you close to ensure your silence. Or worse, that you've been compromised and have no choice but to stay. The injustice of it burned in Eleanor's chest. That's absurd. Marcus has been nothing but honorable. I know that, dear, but Samuel Rivers is quite convincing. He speaks of your father's fortune, your mother's connections, the life you could have had. He makes your current position seem well beneath you. Eleanor straightened her spine. There is nothing beneath me about teaching a brilliant child and helping a good man raise his daughter. If others can't see that, then that's their failing, not mine. Mrs. Patterson smiled. That's the spirit. But Eleanor, be careful. Rivers has been asking questions about Marcus's past, about the war, about Sarah's death. He's even sent telegrams to Denver looking for information. A man that determined can be dangerous. Eleanor returned to the ranch that afternoon to find Marcus in the barn working with a new horse, a wild Mustang he'd captured the week before. The animal was magnificent but terrified, pressing itself against the far wall of the stall, eyes rolling white with fear. "Easy, boy," Marcus murmured, his voice low and hypnotic. "No one's going to hurt you. You've been running so long you've forgotten what it's like to be. Still, haven't you?" Eleanor watched from the doorway, struck by the parallel to Marcus himself, a wild creature wounded and wary, slowly learning to trust again. "Samuel's been talking," she said quietly, not wanting to startle the horse. Marcus didn't turn, but she saw his shoulders tense. "I know. Tom from the saloon told me. Says Rivers is buying drinks for anyone willing to share stories about me. I'm sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't come here, don't." Marcus turned, then his gray eyes intense. "Don't you dare apologize for being the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years." Before Eleanor could respond, Lucy came running from the house, her face flushed with excitement. "Miss Eleanor Papa, there's a man coming, not Mr. Rivers, someone else. He has a badge." Marcus was out of the barn in seconds, Eleanor close behind. A rider was indeed approaching Sheriff Coleman, his silver star glinting in the afternoon sun. Eleanor's heart sank. Had Samuel's gossip campaign prompted some kind of official investigation? Marcus. The sheriff greeted dismounting with the careful movements of a man whose bones had seen too many years in the saddle. "Miss Whitfield, I'm afraid I'm here on official business." "If this is about Rivers," Marcus began, but the sheriff held up his hand. "It's not about Rivers, though he's certainly been making enough noise. No, I've received a telegraph from the federal marshal's office. There's been an inquiry about you, Marcus. About Fort Summerhays." Eleanor felt the blood drain from Marcus's face. "After all these years, seems someone's been stirring up old graves," the sheriff said meaningfully. "Marshal wants to know if there's any truth to allegations of war crimes. I told them I'd look into it." And Marcus's voice was steady, but Eleanor could see the tension in every line of his body. Sheriff Coleman sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his thinning hair. "And I'm telling you as a friend that you might want to consider your options. The war's been over for more than a decade, but some wounds, they don't heal clean." "I didn't commit any war crimes," Marcus said firmly. "What happened at Fort Summerhays was a tragedy, not a massacre." "I believe you," the sheriff said. "But believing and proving are two different things. And with that Rivers fellow stirring up sentiment against you, and now this Hutchinson fellow apparently heading this way with documents he claims prove otherwise, Marcus, it might be time to think about a fresh start somewhere else." "You mean run," Marcus said flatly. "I mean protect yourself and yours." The sheriff glanced meaningfully at Lucy, who was clinging to Eleanor's skirts. After the sheriff left, Marcus stood staring at the distant mountains, his face carved from stone. Lucy tugged at Eleanor's hand. "Are we in trouble, Miss Eleanor?" Eleanor knelt beside the child. "No, sweetheart. Your papa just needs to make some decisions." "I don't want to leave," Lucy said, tears welling in her eyes. "This is our home. Mama is buried here." Marcus turned at that, his expression softening. He walked over and lifted Lucy into his arms. "We're not going anywhere, little bird. This is our land, our home. I won't be driven off by gossip and lies." "But Marcus," Eleanor said carefully, "if there's real danger—" "There's always been danger," Marcus interrupted. "Since the day I came back from the war, I've been living with the possibility that someone would come seeking vengeance for things that happened in those terrible years. I won't run from it anymore." That evening, after Lucy was in bed, Eleanor found Marcus in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow, staring at a collection of documents spread across his desk. "My service records," he explained without looking up. "Commendations mostly, medals for bravery. Funny how the same actions that make you a hero to one side make you a monster to the other." Eleanor moved behind his chair, hesitating only a moment before placing her hands on his shoulders. She felt him tense, then slowly relax under her touch. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said softly. Marcus reached up and covered one of her hands with his own. "I'm thinking that I should send you and Lucy away, somewhere safe where my past can't touch you." "No." Eleanor's response was immediate and fierce. "You don't get to make that choice for us." Marcus turned in his chair to look up at her. "Eleanor, you don't understand what could happen. If they decide to pursue charges, even old ones from the war, there could be a trial. The scandal would destroy any chance you have at a normal life." "I don't want a normal life," Eleanor said. "I tried that in Boston. Normal meant marrying someone like Samuel, hosting tea parties, pretending my father hadn't blown his brains out in his study. Normal meant living a lie. This is different. Is it, Marcus? I've already lost everything once. My family, my fortune, my reputation. The only thing I have left is my ability to choose. And I choose you. I choose Lucy. I choose this life we're building together." Marcus stood slowly, his hands coming to rest on Eleanor's waist. "Even if it means facing a murder trial, even if it means being ostracized completely, even then," Eleanor said firmly. "But Marcus, I need complete honesty. Is there anything about Fort Summerhays you haven't told me? Anything that could hurt us?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "There's one thing. The fire that killed those civilians, it wasn't started by Confederate saboteurs like the official report stated. It was one of my men, Private Collins. He was damaged. The war had broken something in his mind. He saw enemies everywhere. When we entered that settlement, he became convinced the women were hiding weapons. He set the fire before anyone could stop him." Eleanor's breath caught. "But that's not your fault. I was his commanding officer. I was responsible for him. And afterward," Marcus's voice dropped. "Afterward, I covered for him. Wrote in my report that it was enemy action. Collins was just a boy, barely 18. He'd already lost his mind to the war. I couldn't let him hang for it, too. Where is Collins now? Dead. Killed himself 6 months after the war ended. Left a note confessing everything, but I burned it. I thought that would be the end of it." Eleanor pulled Marcus closer, feeling the weight he'd been carrying alone for so many years. "You tried to protect a broken soldier. That's not a crime, Marcus. It's compassion. Try explaining that to Hutchinson, who lost his family, or to a military tribunal looking for someone to blame." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chen entered looking troubled. "Mr. Marcus, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." They found Samuel Rivers waiting in the parlor, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something almost like concern. "Before you throw me out," he said quickly, raising his hands, "I've come with information you need to hear." Marcus's fists clenched, but Eleanor placed a restraining hand on his arm. "What kind of information?" "That man Hutchinson, he's not just coming with documents. He's coming with witnesses. 2 men who claim they were at Fort Summerhays ready to testify that they saw Marcus personally order the burning of the settlement. "That's a lie," Marcus said flatly. "I know," Samuel said, surprising them both, "because I've done my own investigating. Those 2 men, they weren't even in Colorado during the war. They're hired guns from Wyoming with records as long as my arm. Someone's paying them to lie." Eleanor studied Samuel's face. "Why would you help us?" Samuel's expression was pained. "Because as much as I dislike your situation, Eleanor, I don't want to see you caught up in a fraudulent murder trial. And because I've learned something else. Hutchinson isn't just after justice. He's being backed by someone with money and influence, someone who wants this land." Marcus went very still. "Who?" "A consortium from Denver. They know the railroad's coming through this valley next year. Your land sits right on the proposed route. It's worth 10 times what it was when you bought it." The pieces clicked together in Eleanor's mind. So they're using Hutchinson's grief as a weapon to drive Marcus off his land. "Exactly," Samuel confirmed. "Eleanor, please, come with me now, tonight. I can protect you from this. Marcus is going to be arrested probably within days. You don't have to go down with him." Eleanor looked at Marcus, saw the resignation in his eyes, the noble stupidity that would make him let her go to save her from his fate. She saw Lucy's bedroom door cracked open, the child listening to everything, and in that moment, Eleanor made the choice that would define the rest of her life. "No, Samuel, I'm staying. But more than that, Marcus and I are getting married tomorrow." Both men stared at her in shock. "Eleanor," Marcus began. "You can't." "I can and I will," Eleanor said firmly. "A wife can't be compelled to testify against her husband, and Lucy needs a legal mother if something happens to you. We're getting married tomorrow, and that's final." Samuel's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally a kind of defeated sorrow. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "Maybe," Eleanor agreed, "but it's my mistake to make." Samuel left without another word, and Eleanor turned to find Marcus looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Wonder, fear, and love all mixed together. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I do," Eleanor replied, "because I love you, because I love Lucy. And because I'm tired of letting other people's opinions dictate my life." Lucy burst from her hiding spot and threw herself into Eleanor's arms. "You're going to be my real mama. If you'll have me," Eleanor said, tears pricking her eyes. "Forever and always," Lucy said solemnly. "We're a family now, a real family." Marcus wrapped his arms around both of them, and Eleanor felt the rightness of it. The completion of a circle she hadn't even known was broken. "Tomorrow, then," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "We get married tomorrow." "Before they can stop us," Eleanor agreed. "Before anyone can tear us apart." Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, and the wind rattled the windows like a warning. But inside, in the circle of Marcus's arms, with Lucy between them, Eleanor felt safer than she had since before her father's death. She'd made her choice, thrown her lot in with the harsh cowboy everyone feared. Tomorrow, she would be Eleanor Blackwood's stepmother to a traumatized child wife, to a man haunted by war. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd chosen love over safety, family over propriety, and she had no regrets. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear, with frost painting the windows of the Blackwood Ranch in delicate silver patterns. Eleanor stood in Sarah's old room, the one Marcus had finally opened for her the night before, wearing her mother's blue silk dress, the one item of value she'd managed to save from the creditors. Lucy sat on the bed behind her, carefully weaving wildflowers into Eleanor's hair. "Papa's pacing downstairs," Lucy reported with a giggle. "Mrs. Chen says he's wearing a groove in the floorboards." Eleanor smiled at the child in the mirror. "He's nervous. Men always are on their wedding day." "Were you nervous when you decided to marry him?" "No," Eleanor said honestly. For the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely certain about something. A soft knock came at the door, and Mrs. Chen entered carrying a small wooden box. "Mr. Marcus wanted you to have this," she said, her usually stern face soft with emotion. Inside the box lay a simple gold locket on a delicate chain. Eleanor opened it to find 2 tiny photographs, one of Lucy as a baby, the other a space waiting to be filled. "It was his mother's," Mrs. Chen explained. "He's been saving it for someone special." Eleanor's eyes misted as she fastened the locket around her neck. "We should go down. Reverend Morrison won't wait forever." They'd decided on a simple ceremony at the ranch with only Mrs. Chen Zhou and, surprisingly, Mrs. Patterson as witnesses. The older woman had arrived early that morning, declaring that someone needed to stand up for what's right in this town, and it might as well be me. Marcus waited in the parlor, transformed. He'd trimmed his hair, shaved carefully, and wore a black suit that Eleanor had never seen before. When she entered the room, his eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked like a young man seeing sunshine for the first time. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself, cowboy," Eleanor replied, earning a rare smile. Reverend Morrison, bless him, had agreed to perform the ceremony despite the gossip. "I've seen how you look at each other," he'd said when Marcus asked him. "That's real love, not some frontier arrangement. Who am I to stand in the way of that?" The ceremony was brief but profound. When Marcus spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "Eleanor, you came into my life when I'd forgotten how to hope. You brought light back to this house, gave my daughter her voice again, and showed me that the past doesn't have to define the future. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, and to spend every day trying to be the man you deserve." Eleanor's vows came from her heart. "Marcus, you gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go, purpose when I'd lost my way, and love when I thought I'd never feel it again. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes to be a mother to Lucy, and to help you build a life free from the shadows of yesterday. I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Morrison declared. "You may kiss your bride." The kiss was tender, a promise sealed. Lucy cheered, Mrs. Chen wiped away tears, and even stoic Joe cleared his throat suspiciously. They were just sitting down to the wedding breakfast Mrs. Chen had prepared when the sound of multiple horses approaching made everyone freeze. Marcus moved immediately to the window, his hand reaching for the rifle that was never far away. "It's Coleman," he said, tension in every line of his body. "With deputies and others." Eleanor recognized Theodore Hutchinson from the church, along with 2 rough-looking men who must be the false witnesses Samuel had warned them about. Her new husband's jaw was set in a grim line. "Take Lucy upstairs," Marcus said quietly. "No," Eleanor responded, surprising him. "We're a family now. We face this together." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Together. They walked onto the porch as a united front, Marcus, Eleanor, and Lucy between them. Sheriff Coleman looked deeply uncomfortable as he dismounted. "Marcus Blackwood," he said formally, "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of murder during the commission of war crimes at Fort Summerhays, Colorado Territory in April 1864. "Those are lies," Lucy burst out. "My papa is a good man." Hutchinson stepped forward, his eyes burning with hatred. "Your papa is a killer little girl. He murdered my family." "That's enough," Eleanor said sharply, pulling Lucy closer. "There's no need to traumatize a child with your accusations." "Accusations," one of the rough men spoke up. "Lady, we were there. We saw him order the burning ourselves." "Really?" Eleanor turned to face him fully. "What regiment were you with?" The man hesitated. "The 42nd. "Infantry or cavalry?" Eleanor pressed. "Infantry," the other man said quickly, shooting his partner a warning look. Eleanor smiled coldly. "That's interesting, considering the 42nd Infantry was stationed in Georgia in April 1864, not Colorado." I know because my cousin served with them. He has quite detailed letters about their movements." The two men exchanged nervous glances. Sheriff Coleman's eyes narrowed. "You boys want to reconsider your testimony." "We might have been mistaken about some details," the first man muttered. "Mistaken?" Hutchinson turned on them furiously. "You swore you were there. You said you saw everything." "Sorry, old man." The second one shrugged. "But the lady's got a point. We weren't even in Colorado that year." "Then someone else paid you to lie." Hutchinson's voice was desperate now. "Please, I need justice for my family." Marcus stepped forward then. "Mr. Hutchinson, I was at Fort Summerhays. And yes, civilians died there, including your family. It's haunted me every day since. But it wasn't murder. It was a terrible accident in a terrible war. A young soldier driven mad by battle started a fire before anyone could stop him. I've carried the guilt of not preventing it, of not seeing the signs of his breakdown earlier, but I didn't order it. I tried to save as many as I could." "You're lying," Hutchinson said, but the certainty had left his voice. "I'm not," Marcus said quietly, "and I think deep down you know that. Someone's using your grief, Mr. Hutchinson, someone who wants my land and doesn't care about your loss, except as a tool to get it." Eleanor watched as doubt crept into Hutchinson's eyes. "But they said they had proof." "Who is they?" Sheriff Coleman asked. "Who contacted you about pressing these charges now after all these years?" Hutchinson looked lost, suddenly an old man clinging to his rage, because without it all he had was grief. "A lawyer from Denver said he represented concerned citizens who wanted justice for war crimes, said he had witnesses' evidence." "A lawyer paid by land speculators," Eleanor said gently. "Mr. Hutchinson, your family's death was a tragedy, but destroying another family won't bring them back." Hutchinson looked at Lucy, perhaps really seeing her for the first time, a child who'd lost her mother, clinging to her father's hand, with fear in her eyes. Something in his face crumbled. "My Mary had brown eyes like that," he said quietly. "My boy, too." Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat. "Seems to me these witnesses aren't credible, and without them, there's no new evidence to support an arrest. Hutchinson, I'm sorry for your loss, but this isn't the way." The two false witnesses had already mounted their horses, eager to leave, before questions about who hired them could be pressed. Hutchinson stood alone, looking older and more fragile than before. "I just wanted someone to pay," he said brokenly. "They were everything to me." Eleanor stepped forward, surprising everyone by taking the old man's hands. "I understand. I lost my parents too, Mr. Hutchinson. The anger is easier than the grief sometimes, but it doesn't heal anything." Hutchinson looked at her, then at Marcus, then at Lucy. "I've been a fool, haven't I? Let someone use my pain for their own ends." "We've all been fools at some point," Marcus said. "The question is what we do once we realize it." Hutchinson straightened his shoulders. "I know who the lawyer was. Have his card still. Thomas Brennan from Denver. Works for the Mountain Pacific Development Company." Sheriff Coleman noted the name. "That's very helpful, Mr. Hutchinson. Might be we can turn this around on whoever's pulling the strings." As the sheriff and his party prepared to leave, Hutchinson paused before Marcus. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Not for seeking the truth, but for being willing to accept lies because they were easier than accepting that sometimes terrible things just happen." After they were gone, the family stood together on the porch, the tension slowly draining away. Lucy tugged on Eleanor's dress. "Are we safe now? Mama," the word mama sent warmth flooding through Eleanor's chest. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe." But Marcus was still tense, looking toward the horizon. "The Mountain Pacific Development Company won't give up just because this scheme failed. They'll try something else." "Then we'll be ready," Eleanor said firmly. "But today is our wedding day, and I refuse to let anyone spoil it further." They spent the afternoon as a family taking a picnic lunch to the small cemetery where Sarah was buried. It might have seemed morbid, but Eleanor understood Marcus needed to make peace with the past before they could move forward. Standing before Sarah's grave, Marcus spoke quietly. "I'm remarrying today, Sarah. Eleanor's nothing like you. She's steady where you were, wild, warm where you were passionate, patient where you were impulsive. But she loves Lucy, and she's teaching me to forgive myself. I hope wherever you are, you've found the freedom you were looking for." Lucy placed a small bouquet on her mother's grave. "Mama Sarah, this is Mama Eleanor now. She teaches me books and makes Papa smile. I think you'd like her." That evening, their first as a married couple, Eleanor found herself suddenly nervous. She was no innocent, she understood the marriage bed, but this was Marcus, and everything felt charged with significance. He came to their room now, not Sarah's, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. "Dutch courage," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Are you nervous?" Eleanor asked, accepting the glass. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "Eleanor, I haven't. Since Sarah died, there's been no one. And even with her toward the end, things were difficult." Eleanor set down her glass and went to him, placing her hands on his chest. "We have time, Marcus. All the time in the world. There's no rush." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "How did I get so lucky? After everything I've done, everything I've lost, how did I deserve you?" "You don't get what you deserve in this life," Eleanor said softly. "You get what you fight for. And I'm going to fight for us, for this family, for this home we're building." When he kissed her, it was different from their wedding kiss. Deeper, hungrier, full of promise and need. Eleanor felt herself melting into him, her body responding to his touch in ways that would have scandalized her proper Boston upbringing. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, pulling back to search her eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything," Eleanor replied. Their first night together was tender and passionate, by turns 2 wounded souls finding healing in each other's arms. Marcus was gentle but intense, worshiping her body as if she were something precious and breakable. Eleanor discovered a passionate side of herself she hadn't known existed, meeting his desire with her own. Afterward, they lay entwined, watching the moon paint silver patterns on the walls. "I love you," Marcus said the words, seeming to surprise him. "I didn't think I'd ever say that again, mean it again. But I do. I love you, Eleanor Blackwood." "And I love you," Eleanor replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "My harsh cowboy, who's not so harsh, after all." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. "Papa, Mama." Lucy's voice was small. "I had a nightmare." Eleanor grabbed her robe while Marcus pulled on his pants. They opened the door to find Lucy standing there with tears on her cheeks, clutching her doll. "Come here, sweetheart," Eleanor said, lifting the child into her arms. "What did you dream?" "That the bad men came back and took Papa away." Lucy sniffled. "That we were alone again." Marcus wrapped his arms around both of them. "That's never going to happen, little bird. We're a family now. Nothing's going to tear us apart." They brought Lucy into their bed, the child curling between them like a small, warm anchor. It wasn't how Eleanor had imagined her wedding night ending, but somehow it was perfect. The 3 of them together, safe and loved. "Tell me a story, Mama," Lucy requested sleepily. So Eleanor told a story about a brave princess and a noble knight, and the dragon they tamed together, while Marcus's hand found hers across the sleeping child between them. Outside, the wind howled and coyotes called in the distance, but inside their home, they were warm and safe and complete. The next morning brought new challenges, a letter from the Mountain Pacific Development Company offering to buy the ranch for far less than it was worth a visit from Samuel Rivers to say goodbye and deliver one last warning about the dangers ahead, and news that someone had been spreading rumors that Marcus had somehow forced Eleanor into marriage. But none of it mattered. As Eleanor stood in her kitchen now making breakfast for her family, she felt a contentment she hadn't experienced since before her father's death. Lucy chattered happily about the lessons they'd do that day. Marcus read the newspaper while stealing glances at Eleanor that made her blush, and Mrs. Chen hummed approvingly as she kneaded bread. "You've made this house happy again," the older woman said quietly to Eleanor. "It's been cold for so long, but now there's warmth, light, hope." "We all did it together," Eleanor replied. "That's what families do." Later, as she watched Marcus teaching Lucy to ride her pony, both of them laughing in the autumn sunshine, Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the depths of despair in Boston to this moment of pure joy in Colorado, it had been a path she never could have anticipated. The harsh cowboy everyone warned her about had become her salvation. The child who wouldn't speak had become her daughter. The house that held such tragedy had become her home. There would be more challenges ahead, she knew that. The land speculators wouldn't give up easily. The townspeople would continue to gossip. The past would continue to cast its shadows. But standing there on the porch of the Blackwood Ranch, watching her husband and daughter play, Eleanor knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She'd found her family, her purpose, her home, and she would fight with everything she had to keep them safe. 3 months into their marriage, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She stood in the kitchen, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, the other gripping the edge of the table as the certainty of it washed over her. The morning sickness she'd attributed to stress, the fatigue she'd blamed on the ranch work, the tenderness in her breasts, it all made sense now. "Mama Eleanor, are you all right?" Lucy asked from the doorway, concern etched on her young face. The child had taken to shadowing Eleanor everywhere when not at her lessons, as if afraid she might disappear. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Eleanor managed, though her mind was spinning. "Just a little dizzy. Could you fetch your father from the barn?" As Lucy ran off, Eleanor sank into a chair, her hand still pressed protectively over her middle. A baby. Marcus's baby. After everything they'd faced, the false arrest, the land speculators' continued harassment, the town's ongoing gossip, now this new life growing inside her. Marcus arrived within minutes, worry creasing his brow. "Lucy said you were ill." "Not ill," Eleanor said, looking up at him with eyes bright with tears. "Marcus, I'm going to have a baby." The transformation of his face was something Eleanor would remember forever. Shock, then joy, then a fear so profound it made her heart ache. "A baby," he repeated, as if the words were foreign. Then he was kneeling beside her chair, his large hands covering hers over her stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Eleanor asked, suddenly uncertain. Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of spun glass. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it. Terrified, amazed, grateful Eleanor, you've given me everything." Lucy's voice, a reason to fight. "And now a future," Eleanor finished for him. "A real future." Lucy, who had been hovering in the doorway, burst forward. "A baby. I'm going to be a big sister." "You are," Eleanor confirmed, pulling the girl into their embrace. "What do you think about that? Will it be a girl or a boy?" Lucy asked practically. "Because if it's a girl, she can have my old doll, but if it's a boy, Papa will have to teach him to ride like he taught me." Marcus laughed, the sound rich and full. "Either way, you'll be the best big sister in Colorado." The joy of the moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Joe stood there, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to intrude, Mr. Marcus, but there's trouble in town. That Samuel Rivers fellow, he's been shot." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Despite everything, Samuel had been part of her past, her childhood. "Is he—" "Doc Sherman's with him now. He's asking for Mrs. Eleanor. Says it's urgent." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It could be a trap." "Samuel might be many things, but he wouldn't fake being shot," Eleanor said. "I need to go to him." "Then we all go," Marcus decided. "Joe, ready the wagon." The ride to town was tense, with Marcus armed and vigilant, while Lucy sat pressed against Eleanor's side. They found chaos at Doc Sherman's office, a crowd gathered outside Sheriff Coleman trying to maintain order. "What happened?" Marcus demanded as they pushed through. "Rivers was investigating something about the land company," Coleman explained. "Got too close to something he shouldn't have. Someone put a bullet in him outside the telegraph office. He managed to crawl inside before collapsing." Inside, Samuel lay pale and sweating on Doc Sherman's table, a bandage wrapped around his chest. His eyes glazed with laudanum. "Found Eleanor immediately." "Knew you'd come," he rasped. "Still, care about me. A little." "What happened, Samuel?" Eleanor asked, taking his hand despite Marcus's disapproving look. "Found out about the railroad." Samuel struggled to speak. "Not coming through. This valley. Different route entirely. The land company. They're lying to everyone." Marcus leaned forward. "What do you mean, Brennan the lawyer? He's buying up land cheap, telling people railroad's coming. But it's not. They're going to dam the river instead, flood the whole valley, create a reservoir for Denver." Eleanor gasped. "But that would destroy everything. The town, the ranches, everything except the high ground," Samuel confirmed weakly, "which the company's already bought. They'll control all the water rights for 3 counties, worth millions." "Do you have proof?" Sheriff Coleman asked urgently. Samuel nodded toward his jacket. "Documents. In the pocket. Stole them from Brennan's office. That's why they shot me." Coleman retrieved the papers, his face darkening as he read. This is monstrous. They're planning to flood out hundreds of families." "There's more," Samuel wheezed. "Your brother Marcus. Daniel. He's not dead." Marcus went rigid. "What?" "Brennan has letters from someone signing himself DB. Talking about unfinished business at the ranch. About claiming what's his." Eleanor felt Marcus's hand find hers gripping tight. "Daniel alive. After Sarah's death. After everything. Where is he?" Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "Coming here," Samuel managed. "Soon. Brennan's bringing him. To challenge your claim to the ranch. Says Sarah left him. Something that proves Lucy is his daughter, not yours." The room spun around Eleanor. She instinctively placed a protective hand over her stomach, over the new life growing there. "Lucy, sweet, innocent Lucy, Daniel's child. You're lying," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Ask the child," Samuel said, his strength fading. "She remembers more than you think." Doc Sherman pushed forward. "That's enough. He needs rest now, or he won't make it through the night." Outside, Eleanor held Lucy while Marcus paced like a caged wolf. The girl was trembling, picking up on the adult's distress. "Papa," Lucy said in a small voice, "is Uncle Daniel really alive?" Marcus stopped pacing, kneeling before his daughter. "You remember Uncle Daniel?" Lucy nodded slowly. "He used to visit Mama when you were gone. They would whisper and cry. Mama said he was my special secret." Eleanor watched Marcus's world shatter in his eyes, but instead of rage, she saw only a deep, profound sadness. "It doesn't matter," Marcus said firmly, pulling Lucy into his arms. "You're my daughter. You've always been my daughter. Blood doesn't make family, love does." "But if he comes back," Lucy started. "Then we'll face him together," Eleanor interjected. "As a family." Sheriff Coleman emerged from the office, the stolen documents in hand. "We need to call a town meeting. Tonight. Everyone needs to know what these bastards are planning." The meeting was held in the church, packed to overflowing with ranchers, townspeople, and farmers from the surrounding area. Coleman laid out the evidence. Samuel had risked his life to obtain detailed plans for the dam maps showing the flood zone correspondence about forcing out landowners through any means necessary. "They've been playing us all for fools," Coleman announced, "creating false conflicts, spreading lies, trying to make us fight each other while they steal everything. Old Mr. Patterson, the boarding house owner's husband, stood up. What about Blackwood here? All that trouble about the war crimes. Manufactured, Coleman replied. They wanted his land because it sits on the high ground. It won't flood when they build their dam. The crowd murmured, looking at Marcus with new eyes, not as the dangerous outsider, but as another victim of the company's schemes. Mrs. Holloway, who had always been coldest to Eleanor, stood up. I owe you an apology, Mrs. Blackwood, and you too, Mr. Blackwood. We let our prejudices blind us to the real threat. We all did what we thought was right, Eleanor said diplomatically. The question now is, what do we do about it? We fight, said a voice from the back. Everyone turned to see Samuel Rivers, pale and supported by Doc Sherman, but standing. I've already sent telegrams to the territorial governor, to the newspapers in Denver. This won't stay hidden. You should be in bed, Eleanor scolded. Samuel managed a weak smile. Some things are worth getting shot over. This valley, these people, they deserve better than being drowned for profit. Marcus stepped forward, and Eleanor held her breath. Her husband and her former suitor had been enemies for months, but Marcus extended his hand to Samuel. Thank you, Marcus said simply. You saved our home. Samuel shook his hand. I was trying to save Eleanor. Turns out she didn't need saving. She was already exactly where she belonged. The meeting continued late into the night, with plans forming for resistance. Telegrams would be sent to federal authorities. Lawyers would be hired. The community that had been divided would stand united. As they prepared to leave, a figure stepped from the shadows outside the church. Eleanor recognized him instantly from the old photographs Sarah had hidden Daniel Blackwood, thin and haunted, but unmistakably Marcus's brother. Hello, Marcus, Daniel said, his voice carrying the weight of years. We need to talk. Marcus pushed Eleanor and Lucy behind him. You're supposed to be dead. I was dead, Daniel replied. For years I was dead, but Sarah's letters brought me back to life. Our daughter brought me back. She's not your daughter, Marcus said firmly. Daniel's laugh was bitter. We both know that's not true. Sarah and I, before she married you, we had one night, just one. But it was enough. Lucy was born 8 months after your wedding. Remember, you always wondered why she came early. Eleanor felt Lucy trembling against her. The poor child learning such terrible truths in such a cruel way. Even if that's true, Eleanor said, stepping forward, you abandoned them, both of them. You let Sarah marry Marcus, believing you were dead. You let Lucy grow up without you. What right do you have to claim them now? Daniel's eyes fixed on her. You must be the new wife, the Eastern lady who tamed my brother. I'm Lucy's mother, Eleanor said firmly, in every way that matters. We'll see what a court says about that, Daniel replied. I have letters from Sarah begging me to come for her, telling me about our child, saying she was trapped in a loveless marriage. Then where were you when she died? Marcus asked quietly. Where were you when she rode into that storm? Where were you when Lucy stood at the window for weeks waiting for someone to come home? Daniel's composure cracked. I was in prison, federal prison for desertion. I'd just been released when I heard she was gone. And you waited 2 more years to come forward, Eleanor asked. How convenient that you appear now, just when the land is valuable. Brennan found me, Daniel admitted. Offered me money to challenge Marcus's claim. But it's not about money. It's about Lucy. She's all I have left of Sarah. Lucy finally spoke, her child's voice cutting through the adult complexities. I don't know you. You're just a face in a photograph Mama hid. Papa is the one who held me when I had nightmares. Mama, Eleanor, is the one who taught me to speak again. They're my family, not you. Daniel flinched as if slapped. You don't understand, child. I'm your real father. No, Lucy said firmly. A real father doesn't abandon his family. A real father stays and fights and protects, like Papa does, like Papa Marcus. The streets had filled with townspeople drawn by the confrontation. Sheriff Coleman stepped forward. "Seems to me this is a family matter that should be settled private-like," he said. "Daniel Blackwood, you're welcome in town as long as you keep the peace. But if you're working with Brennan and his crew, you should know the whole valley's wise to their scheme now." Daniel looked around at the hostile faces. "I'm not with Brennan anymore. I just want to know my daughter." "Then earn it," Marcus said suddenly. Everyone looked at him in surprise. "You want to be part of Lucy's life. Earn it. Don't come here with lawyers and threats. Come as family. Work the ranch. Show Lucy who you are through actions, not words. Let her decide." "Marcus," Eleanor said softly. "Are you sure?" Marcus looked at her, his eyes full of a love that took her breath away. "I'm sure that Lucy needs to know the truth, all of it. I'm sure that hiding from the past doesn't work. And I'm sure that our family is strong enough to handle this." Daniel stood speechless for a moment. "You'd let me stay, after everything." "Sarah loved you," Marcus said simply. "Despite everything, she loved you until the day she died. For her sake and for Lucy's, I'm offering you a chance. But if you hurt my daughter, if you try to take her from us, I'll kill you, brother or not." The threat was delivered calmly, but no one doubted Marcus meant every word. Daniel nodded slowly. "I accept your terms." As the crowd dispersed, Eleanor walked beside Marcus Lucy between them, heading back to their wagon. The night had brought revelations that would change everything, yet she felt strangely calm. "You're a remarkable man, Marcus Blackwood," she said softly. "I'm a man who's learned that holding on too tight to anything, anger, grief, the past only brings more pain." Marcus replied, "Besides, we're about to have a baby. Lucy deserves to know all her family complicated as it is. What if Daniel tries to turn her against us?" Marcus helped Eleanor into the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. "Then he'll learn what you already know, that Lucy makes her own choices, and she's already chosen us." As they rode home under the star-filled sky, Eleanor thought about the strange turns life could take. She'd come west running from scandal, only to find herself in the middle of more drama than Boston society could ever dream of. But she had also found love, family, and a strength she never knew she possessed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Daniel would come to the ranch. The fight against the land company would intensify. Her pregnancy would progress, changing her body and their family once again. But tonight, with Marcus beside her and Lucy drowsing against her shoulder, Eleanor felt ready for whatever came. The harsh cowboy everyone had warned her about had become her anchor. The broken child had become her daughter. The empty house had become a home. And the Eastern lady who'd arrived with nothing but grief and desperation, she'd become a frontier wife, strong enough to face whatever storms lay ahead. "I love you," she whispered to Marcus as the ranch came into view. "And I love you," he replied, pulling her closer. "My brave, beautiful wife, mother of my children, my salvation." "We saved each other," Eleanor corrected. "That's what family does." As they pulled up to the house, a light burned in the window, Mrs. Chen waiting up for them, keeping the home fires burning. It was a simple thing, that light, but it represented everything they'd built together, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a promise that no matter what tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The community that had once shunned them was now standing with them. The family that had been broken was slowly healing, and the love that had grown from desperation and loneliness had become something strong enough to weather any storm. Eleanor placed her hand over her stomach, feeling the future growing inside her. Another child for this complicated, beautiful family. Another soul to love and protect and guide through the challenges of frontier life. Whatever came next, they were ready. The blizzard arrived without warning on a February morning 6 months into Eleanor's pregnancy. She woke to an eerie silence, the kind that only comes when snow has muffled the entire world. Marcus was already at the window, his expression grim as he watched the white wall descending from the mountains. "How bad?" Eleanor asked, one hand pressed to her swollen belly where the baby had been kicking all night. "Bad," Marcus replied. Temperature's dropping fast. We need to get the animals into the barn now." What followed was organized chaos. Daniel, who'd been living in the bunkhouse for 3 months now, worked alongside Marcus without words needed between them. The brothers had found an uneasy rhythm. Not friendship exactly, but a functional partnership built around their shared love for Lucy. Eleanor, despite Marcus's protest, insisted on helping move the chickens and checking the root cellar supplies. Lucy ran messages between the men, her small face serious with responsibility. Even Mrs. Chen abandoned her usual domain to help secure shutters and stack firewood. They'd just gotten the last horse into the barn when the full force of the storm hit. The wind screamed like a living thing, driving snow horizontal across the ranch. Within minutes, visibility dropped to nothing. "Everyone inside," Marcus shouted over the gale. "Now!" They stumbled through the back door, covered in snow fingers, already numb despite their gloves. Eleanor did a quick head count. Marcus, Lucy, Daniel, Mrs. Chen, Joe. "Where's Tommy?" she asked, referring to Joe's nephew, a boy of 15, who'd recently joined them as a ranch hand. Joe's face went white. "He was checking the north pasture fence. Said he'd be right behind us." Without hesitation, both Marcus and Daniel reached for the rope coiled by the door. It was their emergency system, a guideline to prevent getting lost in blizzards. "You can't both go," Eleanor said. "Lucy needs at least one of you." The brothers looked at each other, years of rivalry momentarily forgotten. "I'll go," Daniel said. "I know that pasture better. I've been working that section." "Like hell," Marcus replied. "This is my ranch, my responsibility." "You have a pregnant wife and a daughter who needs you," Daniel countered. "I have nothing to lose." "You have Lucy, too," Eleanor said quietly. "She's been warming to you. Don't throw that away by being foolishly heroic." Lucy solved the argument by grabbing both their hands. "You go together, use the rope, bring Tommy back." "That's an order." Despite the gravity of the situation, both men almost smiled. Lucy had developed quite the commanding presence in recent months. Marcus kissed Eleanor quickly, fiercely. "Keep the fire going. We'll be back." The two brothers tied themselves to the guide rope and disappeared into the white fury. Eleanor stood at the window, though she could see nothing but snow. Her hand pressed against the cold glass, as if she could somehow protect them through will alone. "They'll be fine," Mrs. Chen said, though her usual confidence was shaken. "Those boys grew up in these mountains. They know storms." But as minutes turned to an hour, even Mrs. Chen's optimism faltered. The storm was worsening, if such a thing was possible. The house groaned under the wind's assault, and snow began forcing its way through every tiny gap in the walls. Eleanor was just about to organize her own rescue party when the back door burst open. Marcus and Daniel stumbled in, carrying Tommy between them. The boy was unconscious, his lips blue with cold. "Hot water," Eleanor commanded. Blankets, Lucy stoked the fire. They worked with desperate efficiency. Tommy had fallen into a ravine hidden by the snow, breaking his leg in the fall. The brothers had found him by pure chance, or perhaps miracle, when Daniel had literally stumbled over him. As they worked to warm the boy and set his leg, Eleanor noticed Marcus favoring his left side. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." Twisted it, pulling Tommy up. But Eleanor saw the look that passed between the brothers. Daniel had caught Marcus when he'd slipped on the ravine edge, preventing a potentially fatal fall. The rescue had required both of them working in perfect coordination despite years of animosity. Tommy regained consciousness as Doc Sherman, who thankfully had been trapped at the ranch while making a routine visit, finished splinting his leg. "Mr. Marcus, Mr. Daniel," the boy whispered. "You saved me." "We saved each other," Daniel corrected, looking at his brother. "That's what family does." It was the first time Daniel had referred to them as family since his arrival. The storm raged for 3 days. 3 days of dwindling food supplies, of keeping the fire burning constantly, of Eleanor hiding her increasing discomfort, as the stress triggered practice contractions. 3 days of the most unlikely group becoming a genuine household. Daniel taught Lucy card games Sarah had loved. Marcus told stories of his and Daniel's childhood. The good memories before the war changed everything. Mrs. Chen somehow managed to create meals from their shrinking supplies that felt like feasts. Joe entertained them with his harmonica, playing old songs that made everyone forget temporarily about the danger outside. On the second night, huddled around the fire, Daniel finally spoke about Sarah. "I loved her from the moment I saw her," he said quietly. She was 17, wearing a yellow dress at a church social in Denver. Marcus was there too, home on leave from his first year of service. "She danced with both of us that night." Marcus stared into the fire. "She chose you first." "She did," Daniel agreed. "We were going to be married when I got back from the war. But then Antietam happened. My unit was destroyed. I was captured, reported dead. By the time I escaped and made it to a Union prison camp, a year had passed. Then I was tried for desertion because I'd been missing so long. 2 years in military prison." "We thought you were dead," Marcus said. "We all did. Sarah mourned you for a year before she even looked at me." "I know." Daniel's voice was thick with old pain. "When I finally got out, I was too ashamed to come home. A deserter. A failure. I drifted for a while, working cattle drives, trying to forget. Then I heard Sarah had married you. I should have stayed away." "But you didn't," Eleanor said, not accusingly, just stating fact. "No. I came here just to see her once, to make sure she was happy." Daniel laughed bitterly. "She was pregnant with Lucy, glowing. I was going to leave without saying anything, but she saw me in town. The look on her face." "She fainted," Marcus said, "right there in front of the mercantile. When she came to, she was crying and laughing at the same time." Lucy, who'd been listening with wide eyes, spoke up. "Is that why Mama was so sad sometimes? Because she loved both of you?" The brothers exchanged glances over her head. "Your mama had a big heart," Daniel said carefully, "big enough to love many people in different ways." "She loved you most of all," Marcus added. "Never doubt that." That night, Eleanor woke to find Marcus missing from their bed. She found him standing at the window, watching the storm. "Can't sleep." He pulled her against him, hands gentle on her pregnant belly. "I've been thinking about forgiveness, about Daniel, about Sarah, about myself. And Sarah was dying inside, trying to be someone she wasn't, trying to love me the way she'd loved him. I knew it, but I thought if I held on tight enough, loved her hard enough, it would be enough." He paused. "Maybe if I'd let her go, she might have lived," Eleanor finished. "Or she might have died anyway. We can't know Marcus. We can only move forward. Like you did after your parents." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "I ran. That's not exactly moving forward. You survived. You found us. You saved us." Marcus kissed her forehead. "That's not running, Eleanor. That's courage." A crash from outside interrupted them, something hitting the barn. Marcus grabbed his rifle, but before he could move, Daniel appeared from his room. "Together?" Daniel asked. Marcus nodded. "Together." They fought their way through the storm to find the barn door had blown open. Half the horses had escaped into the blizzard, including Marcus's prize mare Tempest and Lucy's pony Buttercup. "We can't leave them." Lucy had followed despite being told to stay inside. "They'll die." She was right. No animal could survive long in this storm, but finding them in the whiteout conditions would be nearly impossible. "I know where they go," Daniel said suddenly. "The Box Canyon to the south. Sarah used to take them there because it's sheltered. If they're smart, and Tempest is, that's where they'd head." "That's a mile in this storm," Marcus protested. "It's suicide. Not if we go together. Not if we use the horse's own trail." Eleanor watched the brothers assess each other, weighing risks and trust. "Papa, please," Lucy begged. "Save Buttercup." The men prepared carefully extra rope lanterns, emergency supplies. Eleanor pulled Marcus aside. "If something happens, nothing will happen." Marcus, I'm serious. If something happens, the baby and Lucy will have you. The strongest woman I know." He kissed her hard. "But nothing will happen. We're coming back." The wait was agony. 2 hours passed, then 3. The storm showed no signs of weakening. Tommy, despite his broken leg, positioned himself at the window as lookout. Mrs. Chen prayed quietly in Chinese. Joe paced. Lucy curled in Eleanor's lap, both of them drawing comfort from the contact. Just when Eleanor was preparing to send Joe for help from town, a journey that might itself be fatal, Tommy shouted, "Light, I see a light." They rushed to the window. Through the swirling snow, a bobbing lantern appeared. Then another. Then the shadows of horses. The men had not only survived, but had brought back every missing animal. They stumbled through the door, ice hanging from their beards, hands frozen to the lead ropes but triumphant. As they thawed by the fire, the story emerged. They'd found the horses exactly where Daniel had predicted, huddled together for warmth. But on the way back, Marcus had fallen through ice into a hidden stream. Daniel had pulled him out, giving him his own dry coat while Marcus protested. Would have lost fingers to frostbite without it, Doc Sherman said, examining Marcus's hands. Daniel saved them. "Marcus saved me first," Daniel countered. "Pushed me out of the way of a falling tree branch. Would have crushed my skull." Eleanor looked between them, these two brothers, who'd been divided by love and death and war, now slowly being united by something stronger. The storm broke on the morning of the 4th day. The sun emerged brilliant and harsh, revealing a world transformed. Drifts reached the roof in places. Trees were down everywhere, but they'd survived. As they dug out, neighbors began arriving, checking on each other, sharing what supplies they had. The Hendersons had lost their barn. The Kowalskis were out of food. The town doctor reported 3 deaths from the cold, but it could have been so much worse. What surprised Eleanor was how the community looked to Marcus for leadership. The man they'd once feared was now organizing rescue efforts, distributing hay from his protected stores, offering shelter to those whose homes were damaged. And beside him, unexpected but natural, was Daniel. The brothers worked in seamless coordination, their shared history finally a strength rather than a division. Samuel Rivers arrived on the 5th day, still recovering from his gunshot wound, but determined to help. He brought news from town the land company's plans had been exposed in the Denver newspapers. Public outrage had forced the territorial government to intervene. The dam project was dead. "You're safe," he told Eleanor. "The ranch is safe." But looking at her family, Marcus and Daniel repairing the barn together, Lucy teaching Tommy card games as he recovered misses, Chen supervising it all with stern affection, Eleanor realized safety wasn't about land or legal documents. Safety was the people who'd risk their lives for you in a storm. Safety was the brother who'd pull you from freezing water. Safety was the community that came together when crisis struck. That night, as they all gathered for dinner, Daniel cleared his throat. "I've made a decision," he announced. "I'm leaving." Lucy's face fell. "But Uncle Daniel." "Let me finish, little one. I'm leaving for California. There's gold mining work there, good opportunities. But I'd like to come back, to visit, if that's acceptable." Marcus looked at Eleanor, then at Lucy before answering. "This is your home, Daniel. It always has been. You don't need permission to come home." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. "I'm not trying to replace you as Lucy's father. I know who her real father is, the man who stayed, who raised her, who loved her, even knowing the truth." He turned to Lucy. "But I'd like to be your uncle, your friend, someone who tells you stories about your mama, who teaches you the songs she loved. If you'll have me." Lucy looked at her parents, for that's what Marcus and Eleanor truly were, then stood and walked to Daniel. She wrapped her arms around his waist. "You can be my Uncle Daniel, but Papa is my papa and Mama Eleanor is my mama, and the new baby will be my brother or sister. We're a big family now." "The biggest," Daniel agreed, hugging her back. 2 weeks later, they stood at the stage station saying goodbye. Daniel had a job waiting in California, a chance to build his own life rather than living in the shadow of what might have been. "Write to us," Eleanor said, surprising herself by embracing him. "Let us know you're safe." "Take care of them," Daniel said to Marcus. "All of them." "With my life," Marcus promised. The brothers clasped hands, then pulled each other into a rough embrace, the first real affection they'd shown since before the war. As the stage pulled away, Lucy waving until it disappeared, Eleanor felt the baby kick strongly. "He's saying goodbye to his uncle," she said. Marcus asked with a smile, "or she, but definitely saying goodbye." They returned to the ranch to find it bustling with activity. The community had decided to hold a celebration partly for surviving the storm, partly to celebrate the defeat of the land company, but mostly to mark their unity as a town. 3 months ago, they wouldn't have set foot on this property, Marcus marveled. 3 months ago, you wouldn't have let them, Eleanor pointed out. That evening, as fiddle music filled the air and neighbors danced in their barn, Eleanor watched her husband interact with the community that had once shunned him. He was still reserved, still watchful, but the walls were coming down. Sheriff Coleman raised a toast to Marcus and Eleanor Blackwood, who showed us that sometimes the people we fear most are the ones we need most when crisis comes. And to Daniel Blackwood, Marcus added, raising his own glass, who came home just in time to help us weather the storm. As the celebration continued around them, Eleanor felt a different kind of contraction, stronger, more insistent. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I think the baby's coming." His face went white. "Now, but you're not due for 3 more weeks." "Babies don't much care about due dates," Mrs. Chen said, appearing at Eleanor's elbow with her usual uncanny timing, especially after the stress of the last week. Doc Sherman. What followed was controlled chaos of a different sort. The celebration continued downstairs while Eleanor labored upstairs, Marcus beside her, terrified but trying to hide it. "I can't lose you," he whispered between contractions. "Not you too." "You won't," Eleanor promised, though she was frightened herself. "We're fighters, remember this baby. And we're fighters." Lucy was allowed in, briefly placing a small carved horse, one Daniel had made, on the bedside table. "For luck," she said solemnly. "Uncle Daniel said it would protect the baby." The labor was long, but not complicated. As dawn broke over the ranch, casting golden light through the windows, Eleanor heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It's a boy," Doc Sherman announced, healthy and loud as his father when he wants something. Marcus wept openly as he held his son for the first time. "He's perfect, Eleanor. Look what we made." "What will you name him?" Lucy asked, peering at her new brother with fascination. Eleanor and Marcus looked at each other, the same thought occurring simultaneously. "Daniel," they said together. "Daniel James Blackwood." After both uncles, Marcus explained. "Daniel, who found his way home, and James, my middle name, to make him his own person." As Eleanor held her son surrounded by her family, Marcus, Lucy, Mrs. Chen, Joe, even Tommy hobbling on his crutches, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she'd been a desperate woman fleeing scandal and loss. Marcus had been a bitter widower, Lucy, a silent child, and Daniel, a ghost everyone thought was dead. The ranch had been a place of sorrow and isolation. Now it was the heart of a community, a place where broken people had come together to build something whole, where former enemies had become brothers again, where a harsh cowboy had learned to be gentle, and an Eastern lady had found her strength. The baby little Daniel represented all of that. New life born from ashes, hope emerging from despair, a future built on forgiveness and love. "Welcome to the family, little one," Eleanor whispered to her son. "You've been born into quite a story." Marcus kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "The best stories are the ones we write ourselves," he said. "And ours is just beginning." Outside, the snow was melting, revealing the green shoots of spring beneath. The ranch had survived the storm. The family had survived their trials. And now, with new life in their arms and their community around them, they were ready for whatever came next. The harsh cowboy everyone had warned her about had become the gentlest of fathers. The broken child had found her voice. The ghost had been laid to rest. And Eleanor, the woman who'd lost everything, had gained more than she'd ever dreamed possible. This was home. This was family. This was love. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley with an explosion of wild flowers that old-timers said they'd never seen matched. Eleanor stood on the porch, baby Daniel on her hip, watching Lucy help Marcus and the ranch hands repair the last of the winter's damage. At 4 months old, little Daniel was already showing his father's stubborn streak and his mother's bright eyes. "Letter from Uncle Daniel," Lucy called, racing from the road where she'd met the mail carrier. She'd taken to haunting the postal route ever since her uncle had left for California. Eleanor read the letter aloud while the family gathered for lunch. "My dear family, California is everything I hoped and more. I've staked a promising claim and already pulled enough gold to secure my future. But more importantly, I've found peace here. I wake without ghosts, work without guilt, and sleep without nightmares. Thank you for giving me the chance to say goodbye properly, to make amends to see Lucy flourishing. Kiss my nephew and namesake for me. I'm saving every penny to visit at Christmas. Your brother Daniel." "He sounds happy," Lucy observed. "He sounds free," Marcus corrected, understanding better than anyone the weight his brother had carried. That afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Thomas Brennan, the lawyer from the Mountain Pacific Development Company, accompanied by 2 federal marshals. Eleanor instinctively clutched baby Daniel tighter. "Mr. Blackwood," Brennan said smoothly, though his expensive suit was dusty from the road. "I've come with a proposition." "The answer is no," Marcus said flatly. "You haven't heard the offer." "Don't need to. My land isn't for sale." Brennan's smile was sharp as a blade. "Actually, Mr. Blackwood, I'm not here to buy. I'm here to inform you that my clients are withdrawing all claims to lands in this valley. The federal investigation prompted by Mr. Rivers's unfortunately obtained documents has made our position untenable." Eleanor and Marcus exchanged surprised glances. "However," Brennan continued, "we find ourselves in possession of certain documents that might interest you. Documents pertaining to your service record to Fort Summerhays, to Private Collins." Marcus went rigid. "You're blackmailing me." "On the contrary, I'm offering to sell them to you. All records, all testimonies, everything we gathered, destroyed or delivered to you, your choice, for a very reasonable price." "How reasonable?" Eleanor asked, though the thought of paying these vipers galled her. $5,000. It was a fortune, more than the ranch made in 2 good years, but it would buy Marcus's freedom from the past, once and for all. "We don't have that kind of money," Marcus said. "Then perhaps we could work out a trade. There's a parcel of your land, the North Quarter section, worthless for ranching too rocky, but valuable to us for other reasons." Eleanor saw Marcus struggling. That land was worthless, true, but it had been his father's first claim, held sentimental value. "We need time to consider," Eleanor said. 24 hours, Brennan replied. "Then I take my documents to the federal prosecutor. War crimes have no statute of limitations, Mr. Blackwood." After Brennan left, the family sat in tense silence. Even Lucy understood the gravity of the situation. "We could sell some cattle," Joe suggested. "Not enough," Marcus said. "Not nearly enough." "I have Mother's jewelry," Eleanor offered. "The pieces I saved, they might bring 1,000. "Still short by thousands," Marcus said defeatedly. "Maybe it's time I faced the music, told the truth about Collins, about everything." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "We're not giving up. There has to be another way." The answer came from the most unexpected source. That evening, Samuel Rivers arrived at the ranch still walking with a cane from his injury, but eyes bright with purpose. "I heard about Brennan's visit," he said. "News travels fast in a small town. I have a proposition of my own." Marcus's expression was skeptical. "We're not taking charity, Rivers." "Not charity. Investment." Samuel pulled out a leather portfolio. "I've been corresponding with colleagues in Denver. There's enormous demand for a new breed of horses cavalry mounts that can handle both the mountains and plains. Your breeding program, Marcus, combined with my veterinary knowledge, could produce exactly what they're looking for." "You want to go into business with me?" Marcus asked incredulously. "I want to invest in the future," Samuel corrected. $5,000 for a 40% stake in Blackwood Rivers Horse Breeding Company. You maintain control. I provide medical expertise and initial capital. Eleanor saw the pride warring with pragmatism in Marcus's face. "Why would you do this?" Marcus asked. "After everything," Samuel looked at Eleanor, then at the baby in her arms. "Because I've learned that holding on to bitterness only poisons yourself. Because you and Eleanor belong together, and because I believe this venture will make us all wealthy. It's good business, personal feelings aside." 40% is too much, Marcus countered, the businessman in him emerging. 30%, 35, and I get naming rights on the first foal. Marcus extended his hand. "Deal." They signed the papers that night. The next morning, when Brennan returned, Marcus had the money waiting. "I want to see you burn every document," Marcus demanded. Brennan shrugged. "As you wish." They built a bonfire in the yard, and page by page the past went up in smoke. Testimonies, reports, letters, all of it consumed by flames. Eleanor noticed Hutchinson's name on several documents. "He was part of your scheme from the beginning," she accused. "He was a useful tool," Brennan admitted. "A grieving man looking for someone to blame. We simply pointed him in the right direction. The fact that it was the wrong direction, well, that's business." "You're a monster," Eleanor said. "I'm a businessman, Mrs. Blackwood. There's often little difference." As Brennan's carriage pulled away, Marcus pulled Eleanor close. "It's over. It's finally over." But Eleanor knew better. The past might be burned, but the future still had to be built. The horse breeding partnership exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 6 months, they had contracts with the cavalry for 50 horses. Samuel proved not just a competent partner, but a brilliant veterinarian whose techniques for preventing disease saved countless animals. More surprisingly, Samuel began courting Mrs. Patterson's niece, a young widow named Catherine, who'd arrived from Chicago. Watching Samuel happy with someone else finally freed Eleanor from the last vestiges of guilt about rejecting him. Lucy thrived as a big sister, teaching Daniel to crawl, then walk, always patient with his demands for attention. She also discovered a talent for training horses, working with the yearlings with an intuition that amazed even Marcus. "She's got the gift," Samuel said one day, watching Lucy gentle a particularly spirited colt. "Could be one of the finest trainers in the territory someday." "Women don't train horses professionally," Marcus said automatically. "Women don't do a lot of things until they do," Eleanor countered, bouncing Daniel on her knee. "Times are changing, Marcus. Lucy could be part of that change." The letter that changed everything arrived in October. It was addressed to Eleanor, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a bank draft for $20,000 and a brief note. "Mrs. Blackwood, I am the executor of your late Aunt Millicent's estate in Boston. She passed 6 months ago, leaving her considerable fortune to you, her only surviving relative she considered worthy. She wrote that your courage in leaving Boston to forge your own path inspired her own final years. Use this wisely. Build the life you deserve." Eleanor stared at the draft in shock. Aunt Millicent had been her mother's spinster sister, a woman who'd made a fortune in shipping investments, but whom the family had largely ignored due to her unladylike business interests. $20,000. Marcus breathed. Eleanor, that's enough to build a school, Eleanor interrupted. A proper school for Silver Ridge, with books and supplies and a trained teacher. You want to give it away. I want to invest it in our community, our children's future. She looked at Lucy, then at Daniel. All our children. The school opened the following spring, with Eleanor teaching the older children and a young woman from Denver Normal School handling the younger ones. Lucy was one of the first students along with 20 other children from around the valley. But the school was more than just education. It became a community center, hosting meetings, dances, and celebrations. It was where former enemies became neighbors, where prejudices slowly dissolved under the weight of shared purpose. Theodore Hutchinson arrived at the ranch on a cold November morning, almost 2 years after that confrontation at the church. He was older, grayer, but the wild grief had left his eyes. I've come to apologize, he said simply, and to thank you. Marcus invited him in, though wariness remained. I've spent the last year investigating Brennan and his company, Hutchinson explained, working with federal prosecutors. They're going to prison, all of them, for fraud, attempted murder, Samuel Rivers shooting, and conspiracy. Your testimony about their blackmail attempt was crucial. That doesn't bring your family back, Eleanor said gently. No, Hutchinson agreed, but it gives their deaths meaning. And it taught me something. I was so consumed with hate, I became a tool for evil men. You showed me mercy when I deserved none. That changed me. He pulled out a photograph, a young woman with 2 small children. My daughter, he said, lives in Oregon. I hadn't seen her in 5 years, too consumed with revenge to be a grandfather. After our last encounter, I went to her, begged forgiveness. Now I'm part of my grandchildren's lives. I'm glad, Marcus said and meant it. I'm moving there permanently, Hutchinson continued. But I wanted you to know Fort Summerhays wasn't your fault. I've read the real reports, now talk to survivors. You tried to save people. You risked your life pulling families from that fire. My grief needed someone to blame, but it shouldn't have been you. The 2 men shook hands, and Eleanor saw another ghost laid to rest. Christmas brought Daniel back from California as promised. He arrived in style, new clothes, gold watch, presents for everyone. But the best gift was seeing him truly happy, free from the shadows that had haunted him. I'm getting married, he announced at Christmas dinner. Her name is Isabella. Her father owns the neighboring claim. We're combining our operations. Lucy was delighted. Another aunt. When can we meet her? I'm bringing her next summer, if that's acceptable. Family is always welcome, Marcus said, meaning it. That night, as snow began falling, the extended family by blood and choice gathered around the fireplace. Mrs. Chen had made hot chocolate. Joe played carols on his harmonica. Tommy fully healed, and now their foreman sang in a surprisingly beautiful tenor. Eleanor looked around the room at Marcus teaching Daniel to walk at Lucy, reading to the younger ranch children at Samuel and Catherine planning their own wedding, at this unlikely family forged from loss and hope. What are you thinking? Marcus asked, settling beside her with Daniel in his arms. About how wrong everyone was, Eleanor said. They warned me about the harsh cowboy, said you'd break my heart, ruin my life. And instead you saved me. We saved each other. Marcus kissed her temple. I was thinking about Sarah earlier, not with sadness, but with gratitude. If she hadn't died, as terrible as that sounds, none of this would exist. Lucy wouldn't have found her voice. Daniel wouldn't have found peace. I wouldn't have found you. And I'd still be in Boston, probably married to some banker, dying inside while maintaining perfect propriety, Eleanor added. Mama, Papa, look, Lucy called from the window. The stars are so bright. They joined her, looking out at the vast Colorado sky, brilliant with countless stars reflected on fresh snow. Uncle Daniel says in California you can see different stars, Lucy said. But I think our stars are the best. Our everything is the best, Marcus agreed, pulling his family close. A year later, at the dedication of the new school building, expanded thanks to the success of the horse breeding business, Eleanor stood before the entire community to give a speech. 3 years ago, I arrived in Silver Ridge with nothing but desperation and 2 worn cases. I was warned about the dangers here, the isolation, the hardships, and especially about a certain harsh cowboy named Marcus Blackwood. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. But I learned that sometimes the things we're warned about become our greatest blessings. The isolation taught me self-reliance. The hardships taught me strength. And that harsh cowboy, he taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every day, especially through the storms. She looked at Marcus, standing with their children. Lucy, tall and confident, at 12. Daniel, toddling at 2. And the gentle swell under Eleanor's dress, suggesting another addition coming soon. Silver Ridge took in a broken woman and gave her a family. It took a divided community and forged it into something stronger. We've weathered blizzards and blackmail loss and renewal. And we're still standing, still growing, still believing in second chances and new beginnings. The applause was thunderous. Marcus caught her as she stepped down from the podium, kissing her soundly, to cheers from the crowd. "Have I told you today that I love you?" he murmured against her ear. "Only a dozen times," she replied. "I might need to hear it again. I love you, Eleanor Blackwood, my teacher, my salvation, my heart. And I love you, Marcus Blackwood, my harsh cowboy, who waited for my tears to dry and gave me reason to smile again." As the celebration continued around them, their community, their family, their life, Eleanor thought about the girl she'd been in Boston, proper confined, slowly suffocating under the weight of expectations. That girl was gone, replaced by a frontier woman who could birth a baby in a blizzard, face down corrupt lawyers, teach a room full of children, and love a complicated man with a complicated past. She'd been warned about the harsh cowboy. Thank God she hadn't listened. The ranch thrived, the school grew, the family expanded, and in the annals of Silver Ridge, the story was told for generations of the Eastern lady and the harsh cowboy who'd found each other across miles and tragedy, who'd built something beautiful from ashes, who'd proved that sometimes the best love stories begin with warnings no one heeds. 25 years had passed since Eleanor Whitfield first stepped off that dusty stagecoach in Silver Ridge. Now, on a golden September afternoon in 1901, she stood in the same spot, though the town around her had transformed beyond recognition. The railroad had finally come through, not to destroy as Brennan had planned, but to connect Silver Ridge to the wider world. Buildings of brick and stone had replaced the wooden structures. The streets were properly graded, and electric lights were being installed along Main Street. But it was the crowd gathered at the train station that made Eleanor's heart swell. They weren't here for her, not exactly. They were here for Lucy. Nervous. Marcus asked his hair, now completely silver, but his eyes still that piercing gray that had first captured her attention. Proud, Eleanor corrected, adjusting the collar of her traveling dress. "Our little girl is about to change the world." Lucy Blackwood Morrison, she'd kept both names after marrying, stood on the platform in a divided skirt that had scandalized some of the older town's women. But that perfectly suited her role as the first woman to receive a veterinary license in Colorado. At 32, she was confident, brilliant, and about to board a train to Denver where she would address the Territorial Veterinary Association. "Mama, Papa, stop fussing." Lucy laughed her own children, twin boys of 8, racing around her skirts. "I'm just giving a speech." "You're breaking barriers," Eleanor corrected. "There's a difference." Her husband, Tom Morrison, the reverend son who'd loved her since they were children, beamed with pride. He'd never once suggested Lucy should give up her work, even after the twins were born. If anything, he'd become her strongest advocate, managing their ranch while she studied and trained. "All aboard," the conductor called. Lucy hugged her parents tightly. "I wouldn't be here without you, either of you. Papa, you taught me that strength isn't about being hard, it's about being steady. And Mama, you showed me that a woman can be anything she has the courage to become." Daniel, now 26, and Marcus's partner in what had become the largest horse breeding operation in 3 states, stepped forward with his wife Mary. "Give them hell in Denver, sister." "Language, Daniel." Eleanor scolded, though she was smiling. "She gets it from you, Mama," Lucy teased. "The first time I heard you curse was when that rattlesnake got in the chicken coop. You used words I didn't know existed." The family laughed, remembering. It was one of thousands of small moments that had built their life together. As the train pulled away with Lucy waving from the window, Eleanor felt Marcus's arm come around her waist. "We did good, didn't we?" he said softly. "We did." They rode back to the ranch in the automobile. Daniel had purchased another sign of changing times that made Marcus grumble about the noise and smell, though Eleanor caught him admiring the machine when he thought no one was looking. The ranch had expanded to over 3,000 acres, now employing dozens of families. The original house had been added to over the years, but maintained its essential character, warm, welcoming, solid as the mountains behind it. That evening, as they did every Sunday, the extended family gathered for dinner. The table that had once been so empty now required all its leaves to accommodate everyone. Daniel and Mary with their 3 children, Samuel Rivers and Catherine with their 2 daughters, one of whom was engaged to Daniel's eldest, Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s, but still ruling the kitchen with an iron fist, Joe and his wife, Tommy, now ranch foreman with his large brood. Even Daniel, the first Daniel, had come for this special occasion. He'd arrived from California with Isabella and their 4 children, successful beyond anyone's dreams with his mining ventures, but still calling the ranch home whenever he visited. After dinner, as the younger generation cleared dishes and the children played in the yard, the original survivors of those early days gathered on the porch. The same porch where Eleanor had first met Marcus, where Daniel had confronted them, where so many crucial moments had played out. "I got a letter from Theodore Hutchinson's daughter," Eleanor said, pulling it from her pocket. "He passed peacefully last month. She wanted us to know that he spoke of us often with gratitude for our forgiveness." They sat in respectful silence for a moment, honoring even those who had begun as enemies. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked Eleanor, "choosing this life over the one you could have had in Boston?" Eleanor looked out over the ranch at her grandchildren playing at the horses in the pasture at the mountains painted purple by the setting sun. She thought of the girl she'd been desperate and afraid, stepping off that stage with nothing but hope. "The only thing I regret," she said finally, "is that my parents never got to see this. Never got to know that their daughter's disgrace became her salvation." "They know," Marcus said quietly, squeezing her hand. "Somehow they know." Young James, Lucy's more adventurous twin, ran up to the porch. "Grandmama, tell us the story, the one about how you and Grandpapa met." "You've heard it 100 times." Eleanor laughed. "But we like it," his brother Thomas added, joining them. "Tell us about the mean people who said Grandpapa was dangerous." Eleanor pulled the boys onto her lap, though they were almost too big for it now. Other grandchildren gathered, sensing a story coming. "Well," Eleanor began, "everyone warned me about your grandfather. They said he was the harshest cowboy in all of Colorado, maybe in all the West." "But he wasn't really mean, was he?" little Sarah Daniels' youngest asked. "No, sweetheart. He was just hurt. Sometimes when people are hurt for a long time, they build walls around their hearts. They seem mean or harsh, but really, they're just protecting themselves from more hurt. Like the wild horses," James said wisely. "They're not mean, just scared." "Exactly like that," Marcus agreed, ruffling the boy's hair. Your grandmother was brave, he continued the story. She saw past my walls to the man I could be. And your Aunt Lucy, your mama, she was so sad she couldn't even speak. But your grandmother's patience and love brought her back to us. And then Uncle Daniel came, the first Uncle Daniel, and there was a big fight, Thomas added excitedly. Not a fight, Eleanor corrected. A reckoning. Sometimes families have to face hard truths before they can heal. And then the bad men tried to steal the ranch, James continued. But the whole town stood together to stop them, Eleanor said, because that's what communities do. They protect each other. Even when they don't like each other at first, Sarah asked. Especially then, Eleanor said. The strongest bonds are often forged from the rockiest beginnings. As night fell and the children were gathered up for bed, Eleanor and Marcus took their evening walk as they had for 25 years. They stopped at the small cemetery where Sarah lay, now joined by others ranch hands who'd become family misses. Chen's husband, who'd finally joined her from China, only to pass 5 years later, a baby they'd lost between Daniel and their youngest daughter Margaret, now 18, and away at college in Denver. Do you think Sarah would approve? Marcus asked. Of how it all turned out. I think she'd be amazed at Lucy, Eleanor said. And she'd be grateful that her daughter had two parents who loved her completely. They walked on to their favorite spot, a rise that overlooked the entire valley. The lights of Silver Ridge twinkled below, the ranch spread out beside them, the mountains eternal guardians above. I have something for you, Marcus said, pulling out a small wrapped package. For our anniversary. Eleanor opened it to find a leather-bound journal, the first page inscribed in Marcus's careful hand, the true story of Eleanor and Marcus Blackwood, as told by those who lived it. For our grandchildren and their grandchildren, so they might know that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone whose imperfections fit perfectly with yours. Oh, Marcus. Eleanor breathed tears pricking her eyes. I've been collecting stories, he explained. From everyone. Lucy Daniel, both Daniels, actually Samuel, even some of the townspeople. About you, about us, about how a harsh cowboy and an Eastern lady built something beautiful from nothing but determination and love. Eleanor kissed him, then 25 years of marriage distilled into that moment of tenderness. You know what the most important lesson is, she asked when they pulled apart. What's that? That every warning contains a promise. They warned me you were harsh, and you were harsh in your protection of those you loved. They warned me you were dangerous, and you were dangerous to anyone who threatened our family. They warned me you'd break my heart, and you broke it open so wide that it could hold not just you, but Lucy and Daniel, and all the children and grandchildren and the entire community we've built together. Marcus pulled her close as the first stars appeared. And you, my dear one, were exactly what they warned me about too. An Eastern lady who would expect comfort and refinement. Instead, you birthed our son in a blizzard, faced down corrupt lawyers, taught a whole generation of children, and turned a broken man into someone worthy of being loved. We saved each other, Eleanor said, as she had so many times before. We saved each other. Marcus agreed. They stood there until full darkness fell. Two people who'd found each other across tragedy and distance, who'd built a dynasty of love from the ashes of their former lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. Lucy's speech would stir controversy. The automobile age would change ranching forever. Their grandchildren would grow up in a world vastly different from the one they'd known. But tonight, standing under the same stars that had witnessed their journey from strangers to soulmates, Eleanor and Marcus Blackwood were simply what they'd always been, at heart, two wounded souls who'd chosen to heal together, who'd proved that sometimes the harshest cowboys make the gentlest husbands and the most proper ladies make the fiercest frontier wives. Down at the ranch, lights glowed warm in every window. Children's laughter echoed across the valley. The next generation was writing their own stories now, but they'd never forget the original tale of the town that mocked a woman for marrying a harsh cowboy, only to discover she'd found a man who waited for her tears to dry and gave her a lifetime of reasons to smile. The end. As Eleanor and Marcus walked back to their house hand in hand after a quarter-century of marriage, a young couple stood at the Silver Ridge train station, the woman stepping onto the same platform Eleanor had all those years ago. "They say the Blackwood Ranch is hiring," the young man said hopefully. "They say a lot of things," his wife replied, looking at the prosperous town, the distant lights of the legendary ranch. "They probably say we're foolish for coming here with nothing." "Maybe we are," he agreed, "but the Blackwoods started with nothing too." High above them, an eagle circled in the evening sky, and the mountains stood eternal watch, ready to witness another story of transformation, another tale of love conquering fear, another proof that sometimes the best lives begin with the worst circumstances. The legacy of Eleanor and Marcus Blackwood lived on not in the fortune they'd built or the land they'd claimed, but in the truth they'd proved that love, real love, doesn't rescue you from your troubles. It gives you the strength to rescue yourself.